Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Liana Friedenbach and Felipe Caffé. At the end of 2003, teenagers Liana Friedenbach and Felipe Caffé planned a hiking trip to spend time together in nature. They were a young couple in love, having dated for several months while attending the same school. However, their parents disapproved of their relationship, forbidding them from going on dates or engaging in such adventures. Determined to stay together, they came up with a plan to mislead their families. Felipe told his family he was going hiking with friends, while Liana claimed she would be spending the weekend with church friends in Ilhabela. Their parents believed these stories. The plan seemed flawless, offering them the chance to spend several days alone together. They chose the countryside of Embu-Guaçu, located in the greater São Paulo region of Brazil, as their retreat. What was meant to be a peaceful and romantic getaway tragically took a horrific turn when they crossed paths with a group of dangerous individuals. Although deceiving their parents was not easy, Liana and Felipe succeeded and were overjoyed to finally be together in a place free from interference. Their relationship had always faced resistance from their families, limiting their time together to brief interactions at school. The opposition was likely due to their ages. Liana was 16, while Felipe was 19 at the time. They began their trip on October 31, 2003. The journey was long and arduous, but Liana and Felipe were determined to overcome every obstacle. With limited financial resources, they relied on free travel privileges and took public transportation to reach São Paulo. Starting early in the morning to avoid suspicion, they arrived at the São Paulo bus station by 5 a.m. on October 31st and waited for their next bus. By around 9 a.m., they reached Embu-Guaçu, where they transferred to another bus heading towards Santa Rita, a small rural village near an abandoned site they planned to explore. From there, they made the final stretch on foot to reach their destination. This abandoned location was isolated and deserted, making it an ideal retreat for them. Believing it to be the perfect spot to relax, they walked approximately 4.5 kilometers to reach the site and set up a tent under the shelter of a dilapidated, abandoned structure. Full of excitement for their week-long getaway in this tranquil hideaway, they savored every moment together. However, the area was not as private as they had hoped. During their journey, they traveled through a forest community inhabited by impoverished locals. Liana's beauty, their neat and stylish appearance, and the bags they carried made them stand out. The locals assumed they were wealthy visitors coming to enjoy some leisure time in the forest. Nearby, a group of men was fishing. Among them were Paulo Cesar da Silva Marques, nicknamed Pernambuco, and Roberto Aparecido Alves Cardoso, nicknamed Champagna. Both were members of a gang led by Champagna. While they were fishing, they saw Liana and Felipe setting up camp in the middle of the wilderness. Fueled by sinister intentions, they began devising a horrific plan. Later that afternoon, Pernambuco and Champagna launched an attack on Liana and Felipe. Before making their move, they observed the couple closely to ensure they were alone and unarmed. Once assured, they launched their assault. Initially, they assumed that Liana and Felipe were wealthy and possessed valuables worth stealing. They initially assumed that Liana and Felipe were wealthy and would have valuables worth stealing. However, it quickly became apparent that the couple carried neither money nor jewelry. Though frustrated, they were unwilling to abandon their scheme and decided on a different course of action. Pernambuco and Champagna kidnapped Liana and Felipe with the intention of demanding a ransom for their release. With no clear plan or capacity to develop one, the criminals hastily took Liana and Felipe to an abandoned house near the campsite. The location was grim and filthy, setting the stage for the unspeakable horrors that awaited them. After evaluating the surroundings, Pernambuco and Champagna concluded that the house was neither secure enough to hold Liana and Felipe nor adequately supervised. Because of this, they decided to leave and search for a more suitable location. Liana and Felipe were quickly moved to another spot within the same area. This new place was owned by an acquaintance of theirs, who later joined their group. Despite the presence of the owner, the house was in deplorable condition, dirty, chaotic, and completely unsanitary. Nonetheless, Pernambuco and Champaña deemed it more suitable for their purposes. Liana informed Pernambuco and Champaña that she was from a wealthy family and proposed that they demand a ransom in exchange for her release. This claim was true. Liana was the daughter of Liana Friedenbach, a well-known and respected lawyer in the city, and her family was wealthy. Pernambuco and Champaña were thrilled by this revelation, believing it to be a lucrative opportunity. During the night, Liana and Felipe were bound and confined in separate rooms of the house. Pernambuco and Champaña assaulted Liana, while her boyfriend Felipe, who was confined in the adjacent room, could hear her cries but was powerless to intervene, as he had been restrained and severely beaten. Stunned and shocked, Liana barely resisted and fervently prayed for the suffering to end swiftly. Liana and Felipe endured relentless torture and beatings. The following day, they were taken into the forest. However, Liana was not the first victim. After some time, Pernambuco and Felipe split off from the group and ventured further into the woods. There, Pernambuco quickly attacked Felipe using weapons. His body was later discovered on a forest trail near the site of his captivity. He had been forced to kneel with his hands tied behind his back before being attacked in the head from behind. Pernambuco and Champaña had learned that Felipe came from a modest family, which meant there would be no ransom paid for him. This disappointed them. Additionally, they saw him as a potential obstacle and liability, which led them to decide to kill him as soon as possible. Liana was not present during the killing, she had stayed behind. However, she heard the weapon and was shocked to realize they had attacked Felipe. When she inquired about what had happened to Felipe, they responded that he had been released. Liana knew better than to believe that and understood that the kidnappers wouldn't take such a risk. What she didn't realize in that moment was that her own time was running out. Liana was left alone with Pernambuco and Champaña, both of whom refused to follow her advice and never made ransom demands to her father. They lacked the ability to organize everything anonymously and avoid detection. These incompetent criminals, driven by greed, attempted a kidnapping but failed miserably. Now, they were unsure of what to do with Liana. On one hand, they wanted to keep the beautiful girl for themselves and enjoy her company for a while. On the other hand, they feared that people would start searching for her and realized they needed to get rid of her soon. 3 days after Liana and Felipe had left, Liana's father, Liana Friedenbach, discovered their real plan when he tried to contact her. He learned that Liana wasn't with a group of friends from the church as she had claimed. Furious, he realized that they had secretly run off together. His inability to reach either his daughter or Felipe raised serious concerns for both him and her mother. Neither parent could imagine the nightmare their 16-year-old daughter was enduring at that moment. Using all of his resources, Ari worked to track down his daughter's whereabouts. He found out that Liana and Felipe had reached São Paulo and entered the forest, where their phones were last pinged. A friend of Liana and Felipe confirmed the information but did not know the exact location of their camp. Despite the lack of specifics, this was still a lead. Ari submitted a report to law enforcement regarding the disappearance of Liana and Felipe, prompting the police to begin their investigation. Ari leveraged all of his connections to expedite the search for his daughter in the dense forest. A rescue team promptly arrived at the location reported by the friends of Liana and Felipe. They quickly found Liana and Felipe's abandoned campsite, which displayed troubling signs: a torn tent and scattered belongings. There were clear signs that something serious had happened here, as the tent appeared to have been cut open with a knife. This suggested human intervention, leading the police to suspect that they might have been attacked or kidnapped. At the site, investigators discovered clothing, Liana's wallet, and her discharged mobile phone. The search continued into the forest, and tragically, they discovered the body of her boyfriend, Felipe. This discovery heightened fears and diminished hope of finding Liana alive. Meanwhile, at the house where Liana was being held captive, the owner, Antonio Caetano Silva, arrived with his friend, Agnaldo Pires. Champaña, the kidnapper, told them that Liana was his girlfriend. Shockingly, he offered her to his friend, and the offer was accepted. Agnaldo and Antonio abused and tortured Liana repeatedly. Back at home, Liana's father, upon learning of Felipe's murder, took action. Determined to find his daughter, he mobilized the national press to bring attention to the case. The search efforts intensified due to growing public attention. A businessman, moved by the tragedy, contributed to the operation by using his helicopter to distribute 5,000 leaflets with photographs of Felipe and Liana across the region. Photos of Liana and Felipe were widely circulated, but sadly, no useful information could be gathered. Despite an attractive reward, local residents could provide no helpful information about their whereabouts. Several people reported seeing a couple in the woods, prompting volunteers and search teams to focus on checking the area near the teenagers' abandoned camp. Meanwhile, Champaña, Antonio and Agnaldo assumed that Liana might be searched for in the forest and decided to quickly leave the area. The next day, they took her and traveled to Antonio Matias de Barros's house, the first homeowner. Acting as though nothing had happened, they went fishing with Liana, convinced they would remain undetected. Champaña even lent her his sweatshirt during this time. By the end of the day, Champaña's older brother visited him because their parents were worried about his absence from home. Champaña introduced Liana as his girlfriend there, proudly showcasing her beauty and expressing his pride in having such a stunning girl by his side. However, his brother knew that Liana had been kidnapped but failed to report it to the police. During their conversation, the brother warned the group that authorities were searching the area intensively for her and had deployed significant resources. This alarmed the kidnappers, who realized rescuers might be close. Feeling the pressure, the kidnappers decided to flee. Champaña then resolved to kill Liana to prevent her from identifying them, though he lied to her and the others, claiming he would take her to the bus station and leave her there. At dawn, Champaña led Liana into a dense forest under the pretense of taking her to safety. Instead, he attacked her with a fishing knife on November 5, 2003. He stabbed her multiple times, beginning with a fatal wound to her neck that caused severe blood loss. As Liana fell and tried to cover the injury with her hand, Champaña continued to stab her chest, head, and back. He then struck her with a large stone on her head, killing her instantly. Only after confirming her death did he leave the gruesome scene, and the group of criminals fled. Champaña returned home, changed his clothes, wrapped the bloody knife in a rag, and hid it in a well near his house. He hoped that the incriminating evidence would not be discovered. However, 5 days later, on November 10th, Liana's body was found in the forest. She was still wearing Champaña's sweatshirt, which contained his DNA. Police were able to track the movements of the attackers and their victim, Liana. They visited all the huts where the kidnappers had stayed and successfully identified those involved. They promptly identified the perpetrators and determined their present location. Champaña and his accomplices were arrested within a few days. At Champaña's house, investigators found bloody clothing and the knife used in the crime. Tests confirmed that the blood on the objects belonged to Liana, and the items also contained Champaña's DNA. Champaña immediately confessed to the crime, proudly admitting that he had kidnapped and stabbed Liana simply because he wanted to. He explained that he was attracted to Liana and desired to treat her like a doll, a possession he could control entirely. However, circumstances forced him to kill her due to the police pursuit. He then detailed the complete chronology of Liana and Felipe's kidnapping. Despite being only 16 years old, Champaña was the leader of the group of juvenile criminals, which included adult accomplices. He was the same age as Liana, but his young age meant authorities handled his sentencing differently. According to the laws of the state, the gang's leader and instigator of this heinous crime was sent to a correctional facility for minors located in the northern part of São Paulo. As per legislation concerning minors who commit crimes, Champaña would remain in the facility until he turned 21. The trial of the criminals began in July 2006. Following the investigation, Antonio Caetano da Silva was sentenced to 124 years in prison for the multiple abuses of Liana. Another participant, Agnaldo Pires, was sentenced to 47 years for abuse, while Antonio Matias de Barros received a 7-year and 9-month sentence for violently detaining Liana and concealing evidence. The trial of the main defendants, Pernambuco and Champaña, lasted the longest, concluding in November 2007. Thanks to Liana's father actively bringing the case to public attention through the media, It gained significant publicity in Brazil and shocked the public with the atrocious acts committed by juvenile offenders against Liana and Felipe. As a result of the trial, Paulo Cesar da Silva Marques, Pernambuco, was sentenced to 110 years in prison for the premeditated murder of Felipe, as well as for illegal detention and kidnapping. The case of Roberto Aparecido Alves Cardoso, Champaña, presented additional challenges due to his status as a minor. As the gang leader, he remained in a juvenile correctional facility. His erratic and aggressive behavior led to multiple psychiatric evaluations organized by his lawyers. They argued that Champaña's impoverished upbringing and difficult childhood influenced his actions. Doctors diagnosed him with mild mental retardation and antisocial personality disorder, conditions that individually pose risks to society but, together, made him excessively dangerous. Champaña was moved to an experimental medical facility designed for rehabilitating criminals with mental disorders, as a harsher legal penalty was not permissible in his case. Despite this reasoning, the public was outraged by the leniency of the punishment and demanded he face long-term incarceration. Public indignation sparked a global debate on reforming the criminal justice system, though these changes did not affect Champaña since his crime occurred before the amendments were enacted. He remains in the medical institution under the care of the regional government. Although the crime was brutal, Champaña, the leader of the kidnappers, has shown no remorse for his actions. He has repeatedly petitioned the courts for release, claiming he has undergone treatment and no longer poses a threat. These requests have been denied by 3 separate courts, especially as he has made no effort to prove he has reformed. Remarkably, in 2007, early one morning, he managed to escape from the facility. With the help of an accomplice, he climbed a 7-meter wall using a ladder. However, law enforcement acted swiftly, capturing him 11 hours later before he could harm anyone. Champaña was returned to the medical institution promptly. Despite committing numerous heinous crimes, Champaña's circumstances are surprisingly comfortable. On December 17, 2007, a television report revealed that he was living in a cozy apartment within a medical facility. His accommodations included a comfortable sofa, a large 29-inch TV, and 5 meals a day prepared according to a personalized menu designed by a nutritionist. These living conditions starkly contrast with the anguish endured by his victims, Liana and Felipe, in their final days. The governor at the time justified these arrangements, claiming that isolating Champaña in this way was the safest method to prevent harm to society while managing his dangerous behavior through hospitalization. Experts estimate that keeping Champaña detained costs the state approximately $2,500 per month. Yet, lawyers argued that his forced detention is unconstitutional and pushed for his release. Meanwhile, Liana's and Felipe's families were devastated by their loss, as the tragedy shattered their lives. For example, Liana's parents were so overwhelmed by grief that they eventually divorced. These families fought hard to ensure justice and succeeded in bringing punishment to most of those involved in the crimes. Yet the main perpetrator, Champaña, escaped serious consequences and now lives in conditions far more comfortable than those he experienced before his hospitalization. This case sparked significant public outcry, leading to calls for lowering the age of criminal responsibility to 16. The proposal generated both support and opposition, resulting in active debate. Ultimately, these amendments were approved. Currently, Champaña is not in a prison serving a criminal sentence but is instead held indefinitely in a hospital on civil grounds due to his mental disorders, with approval from doctors and authorities. This arrangement is justified by his continued threat to society. A retrial for the crimes he committed against Liana and Felipe is no longer an option, as the country's criminal code prohibits punishing someone for the same offense twice. Consequently, Champaña remains in the hospital's relatively comfortable conditions to this day. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Gemma Mitchell. In June 2021, a devout Christian, Mi Kun Chong, also known as Deborah, disappeared without a trace. Her friends had no idea what to do in this situation, as it was extremely out of character for her, especially since Deborah was vulnerable, a weak woman who could not stand up for herself. Just when the investigation began to gain momentum, a heartbreaking discovery was made. A long series of CCTV footage led the authorities to a cold-blooded killer. This crime story happened quite recently in the UK and tells the story of one of the first women whose sentencing was broadcast live on television. All happened in northwest London, where 67-year-old Deborah lived in her home. She was born and raised in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, but later moved to the Wembley area of the UK in 2004. She lived alone and shared her two-story house with a tenant. Deborah was a parishioner of the Emmanuel Church Center, located about 6 miles from her home. Being a pious woman, she regularly attended church services. Neighbors described Deborah as a cheerful, active, but slightly eccentric older woman who regularly visited her neighbors' houses for tea and company. As Deborah was a believer and a frequent churchgoer, she met many people over the years, which helped her fit in and become part of her local Wembley community. However, not all was well in her life. Unfortunately, Deborah suffered from several mental health issues, was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and acute stress. Fortunately, Deborah had a few people she could rely on, and one of the women she became close to was a 38-year-old named Gemma Mitchell. Gemma previously lived in Australia for 7 years. She was an osteopath who decided to return to the UK in 2015. Her mother and sister lived in Brent, North Wembley, and Gemma stayed with them. Her family was relatively well off. She received a good education and then went to King's College London, where she earned a degree in humanities that included a course in experimental anatomy. During her studies, Gemma proved to be an outstanding medical student and received awards for her knowledge of the human body. Her mother worked for the British Foreign Office, and the family's property in London was valued at approximately $5 million. Unfortunately, the family had recently fallen on hard times. The house was abandoned and in urgent need of repair. Gemma presented herself as a pious person, which was similar to Deborah. They met at the church in August 2020. Unfortunately, Gemma was unable to work as an osteopath in the UK due to the discrepancy between Australian and British practices and found herself essentially without a job. However, to bring Deborah closer, Gemma offered her services as a spiritual healer to help Deborah cope with her mental disorders. It is clear that this could not in any way address Deborah's current problems, as her schizophrenia persisted. By the spring of 2021, she was prescribed stronger medications. The people around her began to notice that Deborah had become more vulnerable and prone to strange behavior. In recent months, she had developed an obsession with Prince Charles and Boris Johnson. It's quite a sad story. Deborah believed that she had a parasocial relationship with Prince Charles and she could talk to him through a video on YouTube. She often set the table for the Prince and Boris Johnson as if they were going to show up at her house at any moment. After sending them several strange letters, she received a referral for psychiatric treatment. After Deborah was admitted to a medical facility for 2 weeks, she was prescribed a new course of medications. Although she did not want to take them, her friends persuaded her to go back. After that, for the most part, Deborah's life returned to normal. Her friends rejoiced with her and looked forward to the summer. However, on June 11, 2021, she suddenly disappeared. On that day, Deborah's lodger began to worry when he could not find her or contact her. Given the current state of her mental health, he knew it would be wise to immediately report this to the authorities. The tenant had seen Deborah the day before, so she could not have been gone for very long. CCTV footage recently confirmed this. The footage showed Deborah walking along Chaplin Road accompanied by her lodger. It is worth noting that Deborah did not walk very well, so if she was on the run, it would have been difficult for her to manage without transportation. As the days passed, it became increasingly obvious that something unusual had happened to Deborah. She had never disappeared like that before. Given her mental health and physical problems, this painted a worrying picture for the authorities. But despite Deborah's silence, some news about her emerged. Gemma informed Deborah's tenant that Deborah had decided to return home to Malaysia to spend time with her family. According to Gemma, Deborah had decided to return home for a year to clear her head. This raised doubts among police officers. To fly to Malaysia, Deborah would have had to present her passport at customs, but there were no stamps recorded on it. No one had seen her leave the house, No local taxi companies had given her a lift, and there was no banking activity indicating that she had used any public transport. Days turned, and there were still no confirmed sightings of Deborah. However, 16 days after she went missing, a discovery was made 200 miles from Wembley. There was a small coastal town called Salcombe. It has beautiful beaches and lovely nature. Many people visit this area as tourists. One woman who came to discover the beauty of new places found much more than she expected. On June 27, 2021, the woman was walking with her family along Bennett Road in Salcombe when she saw a nightmarish scene as she descended the old steps. Nearby lay a decomposing body, and the head was missing. The authorities were immediately called, and upon their arrival, forensic experts found that the body had been dumped along with a church business card and excerpts from the Bible. They soon became known that the body belonged to Mikun Chom. Due to the state of decomposition, an autopsy was unable to determine her exact cause of death. However, it could be said with certainty that she was missing her head. Injuries consistent with an assault were found on her body. Pathologists also believed that Deborah had been dead for about 2 weeks, which was consistent with the time of her disappearance. With the case now classified as a murder, investigators stepped up their efforts to find Deborah's killer, and surprisingly, it didn't take them long to find a potential suspect. CCTV footage from around Deborah's home revealed some very disturbing movements. As officers checked all the friends who knew Deborah, they began to focus on her life. Deborah would periodically hold seances in her garden, and Gemma was often with her. Friends reported that Deborah repeatedly mentioned that Gemma and Jesus healed her. These two women had previously been friends, but at least a week before Deborah disappeared, they may have quarreled over money. This theory was taken into consideration by the officers. Working in the field of osteopathy in Australia, Gemma stated on her professional website that she focused on the genetics of anatomy and the dissection of human cadavers. However, after she returned to England in 2015, she was no longer able to continue her professional life as a result of her circumstances. Gemma worked nowhere else, although she lived with her mother in their old family home in Brent. According to eyewitnesses, the rooms were filled with broken furniture and rubbish. Some rooms were impossible to enter. There were boxes and suitcases, freezers full of food, old mattresses, and building materials everywhere. The kitchen was described as very dirty, with various remains of rotting food on the stove and torn food packaging. The second floor of the house was under renovation. The walls and ceilings were unfinished. There was no roof. The bathroom was stained and in very poor condition. Overall, the whole house looked terrible. Maybe this house was the cause of the conflict between Deborah and Gemma. According to the collected messages, to renovate Gemma's family home, Deborah was asked to give her £200,000, and Deborah promised her this. However, after a while, Deborah advised Gemma to sell the house and enjoy the money because life is too short. In a subsequent message, Deborah told Gemma that further repairs and construction would cost a lot of money, which Deborah had nothing for. And from that moment on, the relationship between them deteriorated. Over the next few days, Gemma became more and more persistent and aggressive towards Deborah. On June 8, 2021, Deborah finally got tired of listening to Gemma's complaints and sent her an SMS in which she wrote, "Until you resolve the issue with the house, I do not want you to come to me. I am experiencing stress from your presence." Just 3 days after this, Deborah disappeared. Fortunately, many surveillance cameras filled in all the gaps and allowed law enforcement to create a clear picture of what happened. At 6:15 a.m. on June 11th, Gemma was seen leaving her abandoned house with a large travel suitcase and a backpack on her shoulders. At that time, she was wearing a hat. By 6:40 a.m., Gemma had already changed her clothes, covered her face with a mask, and put her backpack inside the suitcase. In this CCTV footage, Gemma can be seen moving towards Deborah's house. At 7:56 a.m., she took off her hat. However, she could still be seen with the suitcase and mask on her face. Presumably, Deborah was tragically killed in the next 4 hours, because at 12:05 p.m., Gemma was again caught on CCTV, this time carrying 2 suitcases. They both seemed quite heavy as she struggled to carry them. The smaller suitcase most likely contained personal belongings and Deborah's financial documents, which Gemma needed for her further actions, as she intended to use them to create a will. Then, she called a taxi to take her with the 2 suitcases to the right address, but Gemma had to wait for the car for 40 minutes. It was only at 4:15 p.m. that she returned home with a large blue suitcase. Later that evening, Gemma went to a hospital located in the center of town for treatment of a broken finger. She told the doctors that she accidentally pinched her finger in a door. In the following days, in an attempt to cover up the crime, Gemma sent several fraudulent emails to a missing persons charity, and she sent a message to Deborah's tenant to say that the lady of the house had gone to Malaysia to visit relatives. Now, let's fast forward a few days and see that Gemma is on the move again. On June 26 at 8:05 a.m., a CCTV camera across the road from her house recorded Gemma booting up as she had rented a car from a car rental company the night before. On the way to Salcombe, she stopped at a gas station, where a surveillance camera captured her entering the store. After this, Gemma drove another 200 miles southwest to a coastal town. She parked her car near Bennett Road at about 9:12 p.m., where she found a secluded spot to dump the body. She was seen leaving the area 41 minutes later by the same camera. Now, despite being caught on several surveillance cameras, Gemma thought her plan had worked out well. However, there was one part of her carefully thought out scheme that even she couldn't predict. On the way back to London, her rental car had a ruptured inner tube, so Gemma had to stop at a service station and call a repairman to change the tire. This man still remembers his strange encounter with her. She seemed confused and bewildered, insisted that he not climb into the trunk of her car, not to mention putting a tire in there. Additionally, she wanted to keep the old flat tire. The repairman also noted that the car had a strange, heavy, and musty smell, as if someone had been sleeping in it without any ventilation. Unfortunately, he didn't know this at the time, but the car smelled of death when he had her tire fixed. Gemma returned home, where she returned the Volvo and threw the blue suitcase on the roof of a barn belonging to one of the neighbors. The very next day, Deborah's decapitated body was found. The authorities would need another 5 days to find her head. All these clues naturally pointed to Gemma, and the authorities decided to pay a small visit to her 15 minutes before midnight, taking her into custody. Gemma was immediately handcuffed, and the police began to search the house, looking for evidence that could link Gemma to Deborah's murder. As a result, Deborah's personal belongings and financial documents were found, as well as a fake will from Deborah that had been created on a computer. In this will, Gemma named herself and her mother as the beneficiaries of Deborah's entire estate, which was valued at the time at approximately £700,000. Gemma's first official interrogation was held 2 days later and was filled with a whole host of evidence, questions that Gemma did not answer. There are a great many surveillance cameras in modern London, and the fact that Gemma thought her journey with a heavy suitcase containing Deborah's body would go unnoticed did not work. Apparently, Gemma became more open during the interrogation and realized that she had no hope of justifying herself. Thus, during the first and subsequent interrogations, she remained silent, refusing to provide her version of events. Despite her refusal to cooperate with the investigation, the trial of Gemma Mitchell began a year later. On October 11, 2022, Gemma Mitchell not only denied killing Deborah but also refused to testify in her own defense. Her defense team claimed that there was no evidence to support the assertion that Deborah's body had been kept in the suitcase and that no evidence of a struggle was found in Deborah's house. Additionally, no weapon was discovered that could have separated the head from the body. But still, the motive for this crime was alleged to be money. The prosecution claimed that Gemma killed Deborah in order to forge a will and obtain money for home repairs. A notable level of heartlessness was revealed when it was noted that in the period between the murder and her trip with Deborah's body in the suitcase to Salcombe, Gemma went on a date with someone she had met on the internet at the London Zoo. It is worth noting once again that Gemma graduated with a first-class honors degree in the humanities, including a course in experimental anatomy, meaning she had the skills to remove a head from a body, although it is unclear why she did this. The deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict on October 27, 2022. Gemma Mitchell was formally found guilty of the murder of 67-year-old Mi Kun Chom. Gemma's conviction made national headlines. During the sentencing phase of the trial, which was broadcast live on television, Gemma became the first convicted murderer in England and Wales to be sentenced live, as well as being the first woman in the UK to have her sentence filmed. The judge's words to Gemma were quoted as follows. He stated that she had left her residence early in the morning with a large suitcase that, as shown on surveillance camera, was either empty or contained very little. He mentioned that she took public transport to Deborah's residence and stayed there for more than 4 hours. The judge noted that the suitcase she brought home was now clearly full and heavy. He expressed no doubt that she had killed Deborah in her home and concluded that, considering she had not provided any explanation during her interrogations, she had gone to Mi Kun Chom's house that morning with the intent to kill. He remarked that she showed absolutely no remorse and seemed to completely deny what she had done. With the irrefutable evidence against her, the judge announced that Gemma Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 34 years, which meant that Gemma would not be eligible for parole until July 10, 2055. During Gemma's trial, a statement from Deborah's sister, who lived in Malaysia, was read to the court. In this statement, the sister wrote, "They still don't understand how she died. This secret will haunt she forever." Gemma never accepted responsibility for Deborah's murder, leaving many questions unanswered. However, for many, the motive appears clear and simple. Deborah was a vulnerable woman seeking help for her mental health problems. She confided in her friend Gemma, even offering her a significant amount of her savings to help with the house. But Gemma's actions constituted a vile and disgusting crime. Since Gemma's conviction, several of her former friends have come forward to share their own experiences with her, revealing that she had always tried to steal money, lured partners, and was a real snake. In the end, the case of Gemma Mitchell stands as a chilling reminder of how trust can be exploited in the most sinister ways. What began as a friendship rooted in shared faith and mutual support spiraled into a calculated act of betrayal, driven by greed and desperation. Deborah's tragic fate not only shattered the lives of those who knew her but also left an indelible mark on the UK's legal history, with Gemma's sentencing etched into public memory through its unprecedented live broadcast. As Gemma serves her life sentence, the unanswered questions surrounding Deborah's final moments linger, a haunting echo of a crime that stripped away a vulnerable woman's life and exposed the dark depths of human nature. Ana was born in 1983 in Belgrade, Serbia. She pursued her passion for the French language and literature, earning a bachelor's degree from the University of Belgrade. In 2005, she moved to the United States and eventually gained dual citizenship after settling in Virginia. Ana began her career as a hotel housekeeper, but her hard work, dedication, and kindness quickly impressed her employers. This led to various prestigious job opportunities at luxury hotels and resorts in New England, including the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox, Massachusetts. While working at Wheatley, Ana met Brian Walsh. At that time, Ana was in a serious relationship with someone else. However, after her divorce, she had the opportunity to reconnect with Brian. In 2014, Brian was a complicated man with a troubled past. He was the son of a prominent neurologist who headed the neurology department at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. Despite coming from a wealthy family, he had faced numerous emotional and psychological difficulties. His parents neglected him, which left him feeling unloved and emotionally scarred. They sent him to a prestigious boarding school in Rhode Island, hoping that a good education would compensate for their lack of attention. However, instead of helping him, this only exacerbated his feelings of abandonment. After graduating from boarding school, Brian attended Carnegie Mellon University, a prestigious institution. However, he did not remain there long, as he was forced to leave to enter a mental health facility. Although Brian's parents were able to pay for his treatment, they could not agree on who would be responsible for his care. As a result, he was compelled to leave the facility without the support he needed. Brian lived a varied life and often displayed his love of luxury. One notable occasion was when he bought the entire stock of white truffles at a restaurant in Boston, highlighting his wealth. Even as a teenager, he displayed similar behavior, dressing in a suit and tie while sipping Pepsi in the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton, mingling with high-profile brokers. In 2015, Brian's life changed when he met Anna, and they became engaged. They eventually married and welcomed their first child, followed by 2 more children in the subsequent years. However, their life together faced obstacles, including legal issues stemming from fraudulent art sales. Brian used Anna's eBay account to sell 2 Andy Warhol paintings, claiming that they were originals and that he needed to sell them due to a recent renovation. A buyer from California paid $80,000 for the paintings, but upon receiving them, discovered they were fakes and sued Anna and Brian. The buyer alleged that Anna exploited her connections in the hospitality industry to build trust, which enabled her husband to sell the forged artwork. It remains unclear how much Anna knew about Brian's fraudulent activities. However, she wrote a letter to the judge commending Brian for his dedication as a stay-at-home father. While trying to support him, she is also preparing for the possibility that he could face a long prison sentence. She has begun moving her and her son's belongings into a separate home in Washington, D.C., suggesting that she plans to move there permanently. Anna was an extraordinary individual, both in her professional and personal life, known for her dedication and kindness. Those around her felt her influence, and her positive impact was undeniable. One of Anna's defining characteristics is her dedication to her work. She approaches tasks with seriousness and never takes the easy way out. Her confidence and expertise shine through, enabling her to achieve outstanding results. Despite Anna's demanding career, her 3 sons remained her top priority. She was a devoted mother who always put her family first. Her relentless efforts were fueled by a strong desire to give her children the best life possible. Anna's 3 sons mean everything to her, and she cherishes every moment spent with them. Although she often has to travel for work, she makes sure to stay connected with her children. Modern technology, including texting, phone calls, and FaceTime, allows her to keep in touch with them no matter where she is. This connection gives her a sense of security and helps maintain a close relationship with her children. While Anna excelled in her career, Brian stayed home to care for their 3 sons. This situation arose from Brian's involvement in an art fraud case, which led to him being placed under house arrest. With Anna frequently away, Brian took on the important role of ensuring the boys were well cared for. He aimed to create a loving and supportive environment for them, understanding that they depended on him. He took this responsibility seriously by spending quality time with his children and providing them with all the care they needed. In addition to creating a cozy home, Brian worked hard to keep it tidy and functional. On New Year's Eve 2022, Anna and Brian welcomed a close friend into their home at 8:30 p.m. to celebrate together. Anna greeted the friend cheerfully while Brian prepared dinner in the kitchen. The 3 enjoyed the evening by taking photos and discussing future plans. The friend left at 1:30 a.m., and everything seemed normal in their household. However, on New Year's Day, the friend texted both Anna and Brian to thank them for a fun evening, but only Brian replied, and Anna did not respond, which was unusual for her. Anna had booked a flight for January 3rd from Logan International Airport to Washington, D.C. However, on January 4th, her superiors at Tishman Speyer and her husband, Brian, reported her missing. During the investigation, detectives spoke with Brian, who stated that on January 1st, 2022, Anna left home early to catch a flight due to a company emergency. He mentioned that she used a rideshare service to get to the airport, but he was asleep when she left. However, detectives could not confirm whether Anna had called an Uber or Lyft, and they also did not have any records of her boarding a flight on January 1st. Additionally, her credit and debit cards showed no activity. The detectives contacted their colleagues in Washington, D.C. to check Anna's residence there, but she was not found. Investigators and K-9 teams searched the entire Anna family home and the surrounding areas for clues. In addition to the local police, state and county officers were called in to assist with the search and rescue effort. More than 50 officers were actively involved, utilizing their expertise and resources to look for any sign of Anna. Divers also joined the investigation, searching the nearby streams for possible clues. Unfortunately, despite their extensive efforts, No signs of Anna were discovered, and there was no indication of her whereabouts. 6 days after Anna went missing, a local police detective received a ransom email demanding $127,000. The email was sent by Richard Walker from the address 9984@gmail.com at 5:18 p.m. It claimed that they had Anna Walsh and that she had messed up their agreement for the ransom. The sender threatened that if the money was not paid, Anna would not be returned. However, the ransom note did not include any instructions on how law enforcement should respond or fulfill their demands. As investigators investigated Anna's disappearance, they uncovered suspicious background information about her husband, Brian. In the early 2000s, Brian approached his parents regarding a real estate deal for an old, rundown house in Lenox. He suggested that his father fund the renovations, with an agreement to share the profits when the house was sold. However, things changed when Brian's father invested a significant amount, around $500,000, into the renovations. On the night they were set to close the deal, Brian vanished without informing his family. This left his father feeling betrayed and led to a rift between them. Furthermore, the detectives uncovered several troubling details about Brian. In 2019, after the death of his father, he attempted to sell his father's house, even though he had been disinherited in the will. He was also accused of writing $30,000 in bad checks. However, the most alarming finding was from 2014, when he and Anna were engaged. Anna called the police and reported that Brian had threatened to kill her over the phone. However, the case was closed after Anna stopped cooperating with law enforcement. The detective spoke with Anna's mother, who was abroad at the time. She revealed that Anna had urgently asked her to come to the United States and mentioned having a bad feeling about Anna's situation, especially since she was missing. Given Brian's threats and his legal issues, he became the primary suspect in Anna's disappearance. Investigators found that just days before Anna went missing, Brian had hired a private investigator through his mother to track Anna's movements after losing contact with her for 24 hours while she was in Washington, D.C. He had become suspicious, thinking she might be cheating, and had been closely monitoring her social media accounts for any signs of infidelity. During the investigation into Anna's disappearance, detectives uncovered significant information. They discovered that Anna had been in a romantic relationship with a man in Washington, D.C. When they reached out to him, he claimed that his relationship with Anna was open and that they had spent Christmas Eve together. Due to his alibi, he was quickly cleared as a suspect. However, Anna's affair and Brian's knowledge of it raised suspicions about his possible involvement in her disappearance. On January 9th, Brian was arrested for misleading the police during the investigation. His 3 sons, who had previously been in his care, were handed over to the Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS. Following his arrest, Brian pleaded not guilty. His deception took place during an interview on New Year's Day. During this questioning, Brian told detectives that he left home at 3 p.m. to visit his mother but got lost because he forgot his cell phone. However, further investigation revealed inconsistencies in his story. Detectives obtained security camera footage from Whole Foods and CVS, stores he claimed to have visited, but found no evidence of him being there. Additionally, he was unable to provide any receipts for the items he claimed to have bought. This led detectives to search Brian's home in Cohasset, Massachusetts. In the basement, they found a damaged, bloody knife, which they collected for evidence testing. Crime scene investigators conducted a thorough search of Anna and Brian's home, seizing electronic devices belonging to both them and their children. Among the seized devices was an iPad belonging to their sons, which revealed alarming internet searches made by Brian on January 1, 2023. His searches included phrases like how long before a body starts to smell, how to stop a body from decomposing, and can you be charged with murder without a body. On January 2, 2023, investigators reviewed CCTV footage that showed Brian visiting HomeGoods and buying 3 rugs. They also found concerning Google searches he made that day, such as "Can you identify a body with broken teeth?" Furthermore, Home Depot surveillance captured him pushing a cart filled with cleaning supplies, including mops, brushes, tape, baking soda, goggles, face masks, tarps, and gloves, totaling $450. This raised suspicions about his intentions, suggesting that he may have been preparing for a cleanup. The detectives obtained additional security camera footage from an apartment complex in Abington on January 3rd. The video showed Brian walking toward a dumpster while carrying a heavy trash bag. His effort to lift the trash bag into the trash can indicated that there was something very heavy inside. Unfortunately, when the investigators arrived, they found that the contents of the dumpster had already been taken to a dump, where they were shredded and incinerated. This made it difficult for the detectives to gather further evidence, as the trash bag and anything it contained had already been destroyed. Later, while searching the dumpster behind Brian's mother's home in January, detectives found several suspicious items, including blood-stained trash bags, towels, rags, a Tyvek protective suit, goggles, and Anna's slippers. They also discovered a hacksaw, cutting blades, a purse, and boots that matched those Anna was last seen wearing. Additionally, a part of the necklace she wore on New Year's Eve was found. After analyzing these items at the crime lab, investigators found DNA from both Anna and Brian on the flip-flops and the protective suit, which further strengthened Brian's connection to the case. On the night of January 3rd, Brian returned home and conducted a series of unsettling Google searches. He searched for questions like, what happens to hair on a dead body? How fast does a body decompose? How does decomposition differ for a body in a plastic bag versus one found on the ground? And can baking soda mask the smell of a body? These searches raised further suspicions among detectives, who believed Brian was contemplating how to dispose of Anna's body. They also searched a nearby trash transfer facility and found bloodstains there. On January 18th, just over 2 weeks after Anna went missing, Brian was arrested once again, this time facing charges of murder and unlawful handling of a body. Prosecutors alleged that Brian killed Anna by beating her to death, then handled her remains and disposed of them improperly. His case attracted widespread media attention and public interest due to its mysterious circumstances. The Serbian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, through the Serbian Consulate General in New York, worked closely with the Norfolk District Attorney's Office to gather information for Anna's mother, who was in Serbia. In 2024, Brian Walsh received a 37-month prison sentence for an art fraud case. During the summer of that year, the prosecution informed the media that they were still waiting for DNA test results related to the evidence collected. However, they were confident that the results would be received soon. Brian's legal situation changed when his defense attorney decided to withdraw from the case, feeling unable to effectively represent him. This led to his case being handed over to public defender Larry Tipton, who specializes in criminal defense. When an attorney takes over a case, they must review all relevant information and evidence to fully understand it, identify any weaknesses, and create a solid defense strategy. In Brian's case, this review was particularly difficult due to the large volume of over 1,000 pages of documents to go through. In January 2023, psychotherapist Dr. Robbie Ludwig appeared on News Nation and shared her thoughts on Anna Walsh and her marriage. Dr. Ludwig speculated that Anna might have been in an abusive relationship and could have been in danger. Her views were based on her professional insights, as she had neither met nor treated Anna or Brian. During her appearance, Dr. Ludwig suggested that there could have been complex dynamics in Anna and Brian's relationship. She proposed that Brian may have felt intimidated by Anna's financial success and insecure about his lack of financial contribution to the household. Dr. Ludwig believed that this insecurity could have worsened any existing mental health issues Brian faced, such as depression, anxiety, and anger. Dr. Ludwig's theory suggests that Brian might have felt threatened by the possibility of losing everything he valued, including his wife, Anna, their 3 sons, and their comfortable lifestyle. In the same segment on News Nation, a photo of Anna showed a wound near her eye. She had shared this selfie on Instagram prior to her disappearance, captioning it, "Mild concussion, bruised lip, and a cut vulnerability." However, there is no evidence linking Brian to the injury on Anna. Anna Walsh's friends and family are very worried about giving her a proper burial, believing she deserves a dignified funeral. Unfortunately, they do not have the financial means, and her husband, Brian, who is the main suspect in her disappearance, is not cooperating. Consequently, they cannot proceed with the funeral arrangements until the circumstances surrounding her death are clarified. As of now, formal arrangements for Anna's funeral have not been made. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kathleen Shepard. Kathleen Shepard and her friend Detsy Hughes grew up across the street from each other in the small town of Dayton, Iowa, which has a population of less than 1,000 people. In this quiet town, everyone knows one another. Kathleen was 3 years older than Detsy. In 2013, she was 15, while Detsy was 12. Despite the age difference, they were best friends and did everything together, often walking home from the school bus stop. At approximately 4 p.m. on May 20, 2013, after being dropped off by the bus, they noticed that a red pickup truck was following them. The man in the truck caught their attention by offering them a chance to earn some pocket money. He said he owned a lawn care business and needed help. Although he was a little skeptical about their lawn mowing abilities, he was so convincing that they began to trust him. The man said he could drive them home to get ready, then they would go to work together, and he would pay them right away. However, when they got in the car, he changed his plans. Instead of taking them home, he drove them out of town. When Kathleen and Detsy sensed something was wrong and tried to resist, the man pulled out a weapon and threatened to kill them if they didn't comply. He took them to an old, abandoned house and brought them to a dilapidated barn that hadn't been used for years. He tied them up, threw them face down in the dirt, and warned them that if they obeyed him, they wouldn't be harmed and he would eventually let them go, even offering to give them a ride back to town. At that moment, Detsy realized something was very wrong. First, if he's not planning to kill them, why go so far from the city? Second, the presence of a weapon suggested otherwise from the beginning. Kathleen's last words were, "They don't deserve this." After that, the kidnapper took her into the woods, giving Detsy a chance to escape. Detsy couldn't explain why Kathleen was taken or what happened to Kathleen since she didn't witness it. Although the kidnapper threatened them with a weapon, he was so careless that he left it right in front of Detsy while taking Kathleen away. Detsy was able to loosen her ropes and escape. While fleeing, she grabbed a weapon for protection in case he tried to catch her. Scared, she navigated through the forest, avoiding thorny roots, and then followed a dirt road in search of help. There were no people around. Despite her injuries, Detsy did not give in to the pain. She felt as though the kidnapper was still pursuing her and that escape was impossible. In her desperate situation, she called out for help, and people nearby brought her to the police. Detsy was terrified. During her escape, she had lost her shoes and sustained several cuts on her legs and feet, which were bloody but not life-threatening. While her physical injuries healed quickly, the emotional scars lingered. Although she received rehabilitation, she still struggles with the psychological effects from the traumatic experience. Detsy provided a detailed description of the kidnapper and his car, giving detectives a solid chance of locating him before he could harm anyone else. Later that evening, around 8 p.m., a body was discovered in the countryside, near the area where Detsy was rescued, at a country estate northeast of Dayton, Iowa. The deceased was identified as 42-year-old Michael Klunder, who Detsy later recognized as her kidnapper. Interestingly, the cause of his death was not revealed for some time. The situation was confusing because Michael did not leave any suicide notes, and there were no clues about where to search for Kathleen. The police had to conduct the search for her without clear leads. Detectives investigated Michael's background for possible clues and found some information. He had his first trial in 1989 when he was just 17 years old and was from Mason City, Iowa, USA. On February 22, 1989, Michael knocked on Jill Gilsey's door, claiming that his car had broken down and asking to use her phone. Instead of just helping him, Jill offered to give him a ride home so he could deal with his car issues. He accepted her offer immediately without any hesitation. As soon as Jill opened the door, he attacked her, knocking her down, hitting her several times, and trying to strangle her with his bare hands. Despite the brutal attack and severe bruising on her neck, Jill fought back and, with the last of her strength, pushed him away. She was determined to seek justice for this horrific incident. Michael faced charges for second-degree burglary and assault with intent to cause serious injury, both of which were aggravated offenses. However, after his arrest, a judge decided to set a bail amount that was below the maximum for those charges, allowing him the potential to be released. This leniency angered Jill and others, as it seemed the judge underestimated the severity of his actions. Fortunately, Michael could not afford the bail, so he remained in custody. Michael remains in custody, awaiting his sentencing hearing. Jill and many others who know Michael believe he is not receiving the punishment he deserves, which worries them. During the preliminary hearing, a decision was made regarding whether Michael, the 17-year-old, should be tried as an adult or as a juvenile. The juvenile judge chose to recuse himself because Michael Klunder displayed alarming behavior from the start. He had a history of being problematic and aggressive, particularly toward girls. In November of that year, Michael enticed a classmate into the school restroom. He threatened her with a weapon and demanded that she take off her shirt, but the girl resisted and tried to escape from him. In response, he struck her on the head with a metal object and physically assaulted her. This resulted in serious injuries, and the girl spent about a week recovering in the hospital. By February 1989, it was reported that Michael had been released after fulfilling all court orders following the incident with the girl in the restroom. Michael returned to live with his father and stepmother in Mason City. However, he soon began to have aggressive outbursts. Shortly after, he attacked a girl named Jill and was arrested. While in custody, officials advised against allowing him to interact with older inmates due to concerns that he might either act aggressively or be bullied because of the charges against him. However, his skills as a liar and manipulator posed a risk of negatively influencing other young offenders. Facing serious charges, he could be sentenced to up to 12 years in prison and fined up to $15,000. If he had been tried as a minor, he would have faced a maximum of 7 years. This situation provided his lawyer with both a clear goal and leverage. On March 30th, Michael pleaded guilty to attempted burglary and attempted assault with intent to cause serious harm. Just 5 weeks before his 18th birthday, he learned his sentence. Michael was taken to the mental health center in Cherokee for a psychiatric evaluation. While imprisoned, he was sentenced to 5 years for attacking Jill. He spent his 18th birthday in prison and received an additional 2 years for robbery. However, these sentences were to run concurrently, meaning he would still be released after 5 years. This news troubled Jill, but there was nothing she could do about it. The court had decided that extending his sentence would be inhumane, likely hoping he could be rehabilitated despite being a potentially dangerous criminal. Despite the short sentence, Michael's lawyers sought to have it reduced. Their main argument was that he was still a minor, even though he was tried as an adult. Fortunately, in September 1989, the court refused to modify its ruling. 2 years passed, and he completed his sentence for robbery, but he still had 3 years remaining for the charges of bodily harm and assault before his official release. Michael adhered to all court orders and took part in a rehabilitation program for individuals at risk of committing abuse. He took the program seriously and attended all the lectures, but it seemed unlikely that he genuinely wanted to change his behavior. His lawyer approached the case with determination, believing that Michael was ready for release. Michael had a flawless prison record, with no incidents or fights during his incarceration, which worked in his favor. Michael's defenders succeeded in getting his case reviewed, resulting in his release in 1991, shortly after his 20th birthday. However, he was placed on probation. From the start, it became clear that his old habits were resurfacing. In 1992, 2 young girls, both just 3 years old, disappeared near Michael's home while playing in a sandbox. Their parents quickly realized the girls had been abducted and reported it to the police, prompting an immediate search, fearing the worst. An unknown caller contacted the police station, reporting that the 2 missing girls had been found at a bus stop nearly 100 kilometers from their hometown. A passerby noticed a small orange container under a canopy at the bus stop. Upon opening it, he was startled by what he discovered and promptly alerted the authorities. When officers arrived, they found the girls, who were both injured. Though several witnesses had identified Michael as a suspect, he had not yet been charged. One witness recalled seeing him observe young girls from his window, spending extended periods in his kitchen or living room watching as children played outside or as schoolgirls returned home. In light of the girls' abduction, this behavior raised alarm. The day after the girls were located, police visited Michael's home to question him. However, at that time, detectives lacked sufficient evidence. They faced a challenge in gathering information about the kidnappers from the 3-year-old victims without causing further trauma. Due to their young age and fear, the girls were unable to provide meaningful details. After an initial conversation, detectives still had no valuable information. Michael denied any involvement in the kidnapping, and without evidence, the police had no basis to detain him. Michael took advantage of the delay, got into his 1982 Honda, and left the state, heading to Florida. However, his getaway was cut short when the car broke down on the road. This forced him to seek help from a relative who lived nearby. Eventually, Michael was arrested on Christmas Eve. The arrest occurred at a bus stop in Houston, thanks to an anonymous tip received by law enforcement. It turned out that the call had come from Michael's relative, who suspected that he was up to something, even though they had no knowledge of the situation involving the kidnapped girls. The 3-year-old victims lived in the same residential complex in Cherokee, where the troubling events had taken place. Despite appearing to be a safe place under surveillance, it seems he had been watching the girls for a while before realizing they were alone. CCTV footage from the complex showed the girls playing before they suddenly looked away and moved in another direction. Detectives believe Michael managed to attract their attention while remaining out of sight of the cameras. This plan worked. The girls' miraculous rescue was even covered on television. Michael had hidden them in a container, which he sealed and left at the bus stop. If the box hadn't been discovered within a few hours, the outcome could have been very different. It was a fortunate coincidence, along with the vigilance of a passerby, that led to their rescue. Doctors reported that while the children had not been abused, they did have injuries. One showed visible signs of strangulation around her neck. The other girl could have suffered the same fate, but for unknown reasons, the criminal seemed less focused on her. In a frightened, fragmented manner, the girl described how a large man had grabbed her neck, making it hard for her to breathe. Fortunately, something caused him to stop. This miraculous rescue also helped police gather crucial information. Initially, the girls were too scared to talk freely to detectives, but over time, they revealed that the criminal had attempted to strangle both of them when he took them away to a remote location. Witnesses had a clear memory of the attacker and provided a description that closely resembled Michael Klunder. Following this, he was arrested and charged with kidnapping and harming children. In Iowa, kidnapping can result in a life sentence, and his previous criminal history raised concerns. Michael was genuinely shocked when detectives returned to his home to read him his rights. During the hearing, his lawyer argued for a lighter sentence. Michael was convicted of third-degree kidnapping, but the assault charge was reduced since no one died in the incident and the choking was considered less severe. He received a 2-year sentence for causing bodily harm and a 10-year sentence for each count of third-degree kidnapping. The jury reached their verdict quickly. By the time he was incarcerated, another crime had been solved just 5 months later, revealing that he had also been involved in other kidnapping incidents that he had not disclosed. Fortunately, those incidents did not lead to any fatalities. Ultimately, the court sentenced him to over 30 years in prison, to be served consecutively, with no possibility of parole. His lawyer continued to argue that instead of prison, Michael needed rehabilitation and support for reintegration into society. There was some merit to this argument, as Michael's behavior during his first arrest was concerning. He appeared detached and indifferent when speaking with police. After Michael confessed, he was asked why he felt it was necessary to kidnap his victims. He couldn't provide a solid explanation and later claimed it was due to having a bad day. It's unclear what behaviors might lead to leniency in prison, but Michael was released in 2011 after serving only 20 years. However, this was followed by another probation period, which he failed to complete. Before he could fully adjust to being free, he began to act out again, leading to a more tragic outcome. This time, Michael kidnapped Kathleen and Detsy. Detsy was rescued by accident, but the search for Kathleen continues. This incident increased the total number of confirmed victims of Michael to 7, most of whom were minors. However, the actual number could be greater. In 1992, Michael lived in another state where he committed additional crimes, including the kidnapping of an 18-year-old girl named Lori Lee Smith, whom he lured with his car. At the time, Lori was driving home on a quiet country road late at night. Suddenly, she noticed someone behind her flashing their headlights and signaling her to stop. Believing it was an emergency, Lori pulled over and rolled down her window. Michael then approached her vehicle, claiming that her taillights were out and offering to help check them. Unaware of the danger, Lori got out of her car. As soon as Lori reached the side of the trunk, Michael pulled out a knife and threatened her. He tried to lure her into his car, but Lori was brave and fiercely resisted him. They struggled inside Michael's vehicle until a passing truck interrupted them. It's important to note that Michael typically kept his victims alive until the last moment, with the exception of Kathleen. After Michael was released in 2011 and before he kidnapped Kathleen and Detsy in 2013, there was a significant period during which his actions went unaccounted for. This gap raised concerns and warranted further investigation to determine if there were other victims or crimes that had not yet been discovered. During this time, Michael had plenty of opportunities to commit more crimes, and there were few signs that he intended to change his ways. It was believed that he could have committed many similar offenses, some of which might have resulted in deaths. His victims were often saved by sheer luck or unexpected circumstances. There could be other unresolved kidnappings and murders linked to him. For example, he was suspected of being involved in the disappearances of two 8-year-old girls in 2012, Leary Cook Morrissey and Elizabeth Collins from Evansdale, Iowa. However, proving a connection to these cases was not possible. At the time of Leary and Elizabeth's observation, Michael's phone was detected in a different location, which cleared him of suspicion. This case remains unsolved, and the fate of 15-year-old Kathleen is still uncertain. Detectives are analyzing the information and investigating the final days of Michael's life. Interestingly, he appeared to be maintaining a normal life. He had a steady job, purchased a house, and was married to a woman named Lisa, who also came from a small town. Michael preferred small towns because children there tend to be more trusting, many homes are often left unlocked, and it can be easier for criminals to operate. Michael was fortunate not only in finding victims but also in eluding detection. Even though he should have been registered as an abuse offender and was under constant watch by the authorities, Lisa was completely unaware of his past. As a result, detectives decided to search their home first. On February 25, 2013, law enforcement officers spoke with neighbors to see if anyone had seen Kathleen, but no one recognized her photo. Lisa, who listened in shock to the revelations from the police about her husband, felt overwhelmed and was unable to provide any useful information to the investigator. Around this time, 12-year-old Detsy had regained her composure. She spoke with the detectives and later participated in several interviews, which helped them piece together the details of her escape. Detectives searched the barn but did not find Kathleen there. Hopes for her safe return quickly faded when bloodstains found in Michael's car were matched to her DNA. The circumstances surrounding Kathleen remained unclear, but they were able to make some predictions about Michael's behavior. When he returned and discovered that Detsy had escaped and taken his weapon with her, he concluded that it was all over for him and took his own life. Michael likely feared returning to prison, knowing that other inmates would have treated him terribly for his crimes against children. Something terrible must have happened to Kathleen, leading him to choose death over life in prison. Even after Detsy's escape, there were still no updates about Kathleen. The search continued, and in those initial days, they discovered the girls' backpacks, which Michael had left behind in the forest. Kathleen Shepard's fate was discovered 2 weeks later when a body was found in the river, a few kilometers from her hometown. Unfortunately, her body's condition had deteriorated, making identification difficult. Eventually, it was confirmed that the body belonged to Kathleen Shepard. Investigators found signs of sharp objects on her body and the same bindings used to restrain Detsy. In this way, Kathleen became Michael's last victim. This situation raises questions regarding Michael as an individual. In light of these events, the public expressed outrage towards law enforcement, accusing them of protecting dangerous criminals more than the victims. Interestingly, Lisa, Michael's wife, was one of the few who genuinely mourned him. Could she have been the only person to see some humanity in him that could inspire affection? Or was her seeming affection a result of her husband's manipulative behavior? Sofia Maria Martinez was born on November 14, 1981, in El Paso, Texas. Her parents, Juan and Maria, immigrated from Mexico in the late 1970s in search of a better life. They worked multiple jobs to support their daughters. She grew up alongside her two sisters, her older sister Dulce and her younger sister Marianne. Since a young age, they have shared a close bond. When Sofia was 12, family tensions arose, and her parents divorced in 1995. Three sisters live with their mother, who later remarried a successful man named Ilhabela and had two sons with him. Meanwhile, Juan began a new family, leading to reduced contact with his daughters from his first marriage. Despite this, Sofia did not hold any resentment toward her father and developed a good relationship with her stepfather. Sofia grew up to be kind, outgoing, and compassionate, often helping her mother with the younger children and providing them with support. She had a particularly strong bond with her younger sister, and they were best friends. At 15, Sofia took a part-time job as a sales associate at a local mall, saving money diligently over the years. She dreamed of owning a bright red Pontiac. Knowing about her dream, her mother and stepfather gifted her the remaining amount she needed to buy the car when she turned 18. In November 1999, Sofia proudly drove her brand new car off the dealership lot, a vehicle she had long admired. She took great care of it, keeping it clean inside and out, and drove it carefully. The car was a source of pride for her, and she never allowed anyone else to drive it. By the year 2000, Sofia was preparing for her graduation and was excited about the upcoming senior prom. She carefully selected the perfect dress, shoes, and accessories for the big night. Weekends were spent shopping with her sister, trying on outfits, planning hairstyles, and choosing makeup. In February, the senior yearbook photos were taken, capturing students in their graduation caps and gowns, and Sofia was filled with joy, eager to start college. She planned to pursue a history major at the prestigious University of Texas, with the ambition of becoming a teacher. Unfortunately, Sofia's dreams would never be realized. Although she had many friends, she had never been in a serious relationship. She focused on her schoolwork and job rather than dating. While she sometimes accepted invitations from boys interested in her, none of those dates turned into anything significant. In early March, her co-worker Justin suggested setting her up on a blind date with a friend of his. After some initial hesitation, she agreed, and they planned to meet on the evening of Friday, March 10th. They decided to go to a popular nightclub that allowed entry to those 18 and older, unlike most places that required patrons to be 21. On the evening of March 10, 2000, Sofia hurried home from school, excited to prepare for her blind date. She tried on at least 10 different outfits, stepping out each time for her family's feedback. Ultimately, they all agreed she looked stunning in a bright red evening dress that flattered her figure while remaining elegant and modest. She applied her makeup, styled her hair in soft curls, put on a pair of heels, and carried a small clutch bag. The final touch was her favorite perfume. By 10 p.m., she was completely ready. She entered the living room looking glamorous and twirled to show off her outfit. Her family was impressed, confident that she would make a great impression. She promised to be home no later than 2 a.m. since she had a work shift at the mall the next day, and no one was particularly worried. She was responsible and always kept her promises. At 10:10 p.m., Sofia left the house with a bright smile, climbed into her beloved red Pontiac, and waved goodbye to her family as they watched from the window. None of them could have imagined that it would be the last time they saw her alive. The following morning, her younger sister Mary peeked into her room and noticed something odd. She was missing, and her bed was not just neatly made, it looked untouched. It seemed she had left for work, yet her employee badge sat on the vanity, and her usual work shoes were in the corner by the closet. Mary informed her mother, and at that moment, the phone rang. It was a call from Sophia's employer, reporting that she hadn't shown up for her shift, something unprecedented. This alarmed Sophia's family, who were unsure about what to do next. Since she didn't have a cell phone, her family started calling the landlines of her friends, classmates, and co-workers. Unfortunately, no one had seen her since the previous night, and they did not know how to contact the boys she was with. They also reached out to local hospitals, worried that she might have been in an accident. By the evening, without any updates on her whereabouts, the family decided to go to the police to report her missing. They took a recent photo of her and provided a detailed description of her outfit when she left home, as well as specific information about the car she was driving. On Saturday, March 11th, police made a disturbing discovery in the New Mexico desert. They found an abandoned red Pontiac about 100 yards off the highway connecting Texas and New Mexico. The passenger side window had a bullet hole, and there were dark, dried stains resembling blood on the seat, steering wheel, and headrest. Experienced officers quickly suspected foul play and feared that the driver might be seriously injured or worse. The car was sent to a forensic lab for analysis. However, since the discovery occurred in a different state, law enforcement struggled to find a direct connection to Sophia. After checking the car's registration, authorities confirmed that the red Pontiac belonged to Maria Martinez from Texas. They contacted her to see if the car had been stolen and to find out that it had been driven by her daughter, Sophia, who had been reported missing the previous day. The family was baffled as to how Sophia's car ended up abandoned in a desert in a neighboring state and where she might be. Maria emphasized that her daughter cherished her car and would never have left it behind, suggesting that something terrible must have happened. One theory was that the vehicle had been hijacked and that Sophia might have been harmed, but there was still hope that she could be found alive. However, with no leads in sight, law enforcement was unsure where to begin their search. On Sunday, March 12, a group of teenagers walking near the outskirts of El Paso spotted something shiny in the desert and decided to investigate. As they got closer, they found the lifeless body of a young woman in a red evening dress. They hurried home to tell their parents, who called the police. Forensic investigators arrived at the scene within an hour. Officers discovered the young woman lying on her back, her face so disfigured that she was unidentifiable. Her dress was soaked in blood and covered with sand. Although no identification was found, police believed they had discovered the body of a girl named Sophia, who had been reported missing 2 days earlier. When Sophia's family was informed that a body had been found in the desert, her mother, Maria, refused to accept it, convinced that there had been a mistake and that her daughter was still alive. Her doubts disappeared when detectives showed her a photograph taken from the victim's bra. The picture showed Sophia holding her youngest brother, which confirmed her identity, as it was known that Sophia often carried photos of her siblings in her wallet. In her final moments, she had placed one close to her heart. The autopsy revealed that she had died from multiple gunshot wounds to the head, having been shot 5 times in the face. One bullet traveled through her head and was later found in the sand at the crime scene. The severity of her injuries left her with no chance of survival. Additionally, there were clear signs of a struggle, including severe bruising and indications of physical violence. The inner surfaces of her thighs were bruised and scratched, and forensic examinations confirmed internal injuries consistent with an assault. DNA analysis also provided biological evidence, and defensive wounds on her hands indicated that she had fought fiercely for her life but ultimately was overpowered. None of Sophia's personal belongings were found, except for a photograph she had hidden in her clothing. Due to the severity of her injuries, her identity could only be confirmed through DNA testing, as even dental records proved ineffective. Toxicology reports later revealed that there were no substances in her system at the time of death. Investigators discovered several shoe prints near the body. While most were unclear, one distinct impression helped forensic analysts identify the size and tread pattern of the sole. Authorities found only Sophia's fingerprints inside her car. Although her purse was recovered from the vehicle, the perpetrator had taken her license, keys, and cash. Her family was advised to change their locks and install a security system because the killer had access to her home address from her ID and had her keys. Her family followed these recommendations but lived in constant fear that the person responsible for her death might target someone else. DNA samples from the biological evidence left by the attacker were uploaded into the National Criminal Database, but no matches were found. This indicated that the suspect likely had no prior criminal record, complicating the investigation. Authorities also considered the possibility that the suspect was a transient who had crossed illegally from Mexico, committed the crime, and then fled back, making him even harder to track. A crucial lead emerged when investigators learned that Sofia had gone on a blind date the night she disappeared, arranged by a coworker. They sought to question both men involved. Since her family did not have their contact information, officers visited her workplace at the mall. Justin, the coworker who set up the date, was on shift that day and agreed to go to the station for questioning. The second man, Marcus, was also interviewed. During the interview, Justin explained that he had planned to meet Sofia at the club, but she never arrived. He and Marcus waited for her until around midnight before they left. He only learned that Sofia was missing the next day when she didn't show up for work. Both Justin and Marcus took polygraph tests to verify their statements, provided DNA samples, and turned over the shoes they wore that night. The results showed no connection to the crime, and their alibis were strong, as many people had seen them at the club. During a closer examination of Sofia's car, officers discovered a crumpled ATM receipt that had slipped under the driver's seat. The receipt indicated that at 10:23 p.m., she had withdrawn $20 from an ATM located just a few blocks from her residence. This detail became a crucial lead, as the ATM and nearby buildings had surveillance cameras. Investigators reviewed the footage from all available cameras and were shocked by what they found. The crime had been recorded from multiple angles, which helped them understand the sequence of events. At 10:22 p.m., a red Pontiac arrived at the ATM. The driver's side window was rolled down, and a young woman was seen withdrawing $20 from her account. The footage clearly showed that she was alone in the car. After taking the cash, Sofia paused for a moment to apply lipstick using her compact mirror. At that point, a figure dressed entirely in black, with a hood obscuring his face, crept up behind her car. She did not see him until he reached her window. Without warning, he pulled out a gun and attacked her in the head. His intention was not to kill her but to intimidate. The bullet grazed her cheek, clipped her nose, and exited from the passenger side window. Shortly afterward, despite her injury and holding a tissue to her bleeding face, Sofia withdrew another $200 from her account. The car then began to drive away from the ATM with the assailant now inside, holding a gun to the back of her head. Within seconds, the vehicle was out of view of the camera, and what happened next is unknown. It's essential to note that this took place in the early 2000s, a time when surveillance camera quality was not very advanced. The footage was grainy and lacked detail, making it impossible to produce a composite sketch of the suspect. All that could be discerned was that the attacker was a white male of average height with a slim build, possibly sporting facial hair. This information, along with video clips of the attack, was shared on local television to alert residents of the danger and encourage anyone who recognized the suspect to come forward. The investigation was lengthy and frustrating. After a news segment aired, police received numerous calls, but none of them provided useful information. As time passed, the investigation slowed, no new evidence surfaced, leaving authorities with more questions than answers. At the end of March, a man contacted the police, stating that he had found a driver's license near the spot where Sofia's body had been discovered 2 weeks earlier. The license belonged to a local woman, raising concerns that she might also have been a victim. However, when the police reached out to her, they learned she was safe and had not been harmed. She explained that her purse had been stolen earlier that month at a mall, where Sofia had also worked. Investigators believed the suspect could have been stalking potential victims and shared this warning with the media to alert other women. The very next day, a young man came forward, admitting to stealing the purse. He panicked after seeing the news and worried that police might link him to a crime he hadn't committed. He willingly provided a DNA sample and was cleared as a suspect in Sophia's case. By July 2000, the investigation had hit a dead end. To help generate new leads, authorities announced a $10,000 reward for information leading to the capture of the killer. Shortly after, Sophia's family launched a fundraising campaign to increase the reward amount, garnering support from friends, concerned citizens, and local organizations. By August, the reward for information had risen to $55,000. However, 6 months had passed since the tragedy, and no new leads had surfaced. Then, on September 30, 2000, a young woman named Heather Napa called the police, claiming she knew who was responsible for Sophia's death and wanted to share information in exchange for the reward money. Although there had been many false tips before, Heather claimed to have physical evidence. Heather, a 20-year-old mother of 2, alleged that her boyfriend, Michael Jacques, and their friend, William Berkeley, were involved in the crime. To support her claims, she provided a charred driver's license that belonged to Sofia Martinez. She explained that she had been afraid to come forward sooner due to fear of retaliation, but with Michael recently jailed and having no means to support her children, she decided to speak up for both the investigation and the reward. At that time, Heather was hospitalized for kidney issues, while Michael and William were both unemployed and struggling financially. On March 10, William visited her in the hospital and pulled Michael aside for a private conversation. Heather overheard parts of their discussion and realized they were planning something illegal, which she assumed was related to their previous dealings with banned substances. She didn't probe for further details. Shortly afterward, they left, taking a box of latex gloves from a medical supply cabinet. Later that night, around 11 p.m., Michael returned to Heather's hospital room and claimed they had obtained some money. He said he had hidden near an ATM and signaled to William when a single driver approached. After the driver withdrew cash, William allegedly threatened her with a gun, took the money, and ordered her to get out of the car before driving away. Detectives were aware that this account did not match the actual crime, but they allowed Heather to continue. After midnight, a nurse informed Michael that William was waiting for him downstairs. They then left in separate cars, drove to a neighboring state, abandoned the Pontiac in the desert, and returned home in Michael's car. The next day, Heather was released from the hospital and felt anxious about whether the victim would report the crime. To reassure her, William showed her Sophia's driver's license, which noted down Sophia's home address. He casually mentioned that they could intimidate the victim into silence if necessary. Then, without hesitation, he threw the license into a smoldering grill and watched it melt before going to bed. A few days later, Heather watched a news report about Sophia's case and had a realization. She recognized William from the ATM surveillance footage and understood why he had altered his appearance by shaving off his beard and head. When she asked Michael about his involvement, he told her to keep quiet. Heather retrieved the burned license plate from the grill and hid it. She also noticed that Michael had a set of car keys with a Pontiac keychain, although she was unsure of what had happened to them. In August, William left home, and in September, Michael was arrested for distributing banned substances. By that time, feeling safer, Heather decided to come forward and find a way to earn money by providing information to the police. After Heather's statement, investigators brought in 23-year-old Michael Jacques for questioning. Surprisingly, he acknowledged his involvement and agreed to tell his version of events. He claimed that he had nothing to do with Sophia's death but admitted that he helped William cover it up. Michael explained that he and William were in desperate need of money and planned to rob someone at an ATM. When they saw a young girl in a red Pontiac at the ATM, Michael wanted to call off the robbery. However, William misunderstood his actions as a signal to proceed. Although Michael knew William had a gun, he never thought it would be used. The situation quickly escalated, and before Michael realized what was happening, the car sped away. He waited for about 30 minutes, but when William didn't return, he went back to the hospital to be with Heather. Michael insisted that he didn't know what happened to Sophia afterward and denied any knowledge of the assault or murder. However, he confessed to helping dispose of the car. He later learned more information but chose not to report William, aware that he too would face repercussions. A key piece of evidence, a set of car keys, was later found on the roof of Michael's house, exactly where he had thrown them. William Berkeley, the main suspect in the case, was arrested at his parents' home in early October. At just 20 years old, he had no criminal record, but those who knew him reported a pattern of aggression and cruelty dating back to his school years. He had previously assaulted classmates, former girlfriends, and even his mother, yet none of them had reported these incidents to the police. Despite this violent history, William was a talented artist whose work had been showcased in galleries. During his first interrogation, he admitted to robbing and killing Sophia, claiming he needed the money, but he avoided specifics. He insisted that their encounter was consensual and stated that the shooting was accidental. As interrogations progressed and he understood the seriousness of the accusations, he changed his narrative. He began to portray himself as a victim, claiming he was part of a plan led by Michael. Williams said that Michael had selected the car, believing the owner of a Pontiac would have substantial funds. Unfortunately for them, Sophia only had $220, which they viewed as the price for her life. In the lead-up to the trial, William and Michael tried to shift the blame onto each other, but the evidence presented against William was compelling. Authorities found the murder weapon, a handgun, at his home. His DNA was found on Sophia, and a pair of sneakers matching the footprints at the crime scene were found in his bedroom. On April 7, 2002, William was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to death by lethal injection, which was carried out in the spring of 2010. Throughout the years before his execution, he showed no remorse for his actions. Michael Jacques was also found guilty on November 3, 2002, of conspiracy and evidence tampering, receiving a life sentence with the chance of parole after 40 years. Heather, who had been promised a $55,000 reward, received the money but found no joy in it. She lost custody of her children and, at the age of 35, died from complications related to a chronic kidney condition. Bree Kristen Kuhn was born in May 1987 in the United States and grew up with her parents and her older brother, Eric. The family lived in Pennsylvania until her parents divorced. Following the divorce, Bree and Eric moved to Texas with their mother, whose name has not been disclosed. When Eric entered 9th grade, Bree left Texas to live with their father in New York. At that time, their father was in a new relationship with a woman named Karen. Though Bree and her brother Eric lived apart, they remained close, staying in touch on important occasions. However, their relationship with their mother became strained over time. According to Eric, their mother was physically abusive, and Bree would often defend him. She took on the role of a protector, enduring the abuse herself to keep her brother safe. These traumatic experiences profoundly affected Bree, leading her to struggle with depression and anxiety throughout her adolescence. By the age of 13, she had attempted to end her life. In the face of adversity, Bree focused on her education, attending 2 community colleges. While still young, she enlisted in the U.S. Navy, where she served for 17 years at various naval stations across the country. In 2009, she welcomed her first child, a daughter named Kay, with her then-partner, James. Although their relationship ended, Bree retained custody of Kay, while James was granted weekend visitation rights. She later began a relationship with Colin Turner, a fellow service member in the military. Colin James Turner, born on December 28, 1987, was raised in a close-knit, religious family alongside his parents, Tierva Donald Turner, and his sisters, Nicole and Rebecca. Known for his warmth and strong family values, Colin served in the Marine Corps with a specialization in explosive ordnance disposal. He married Casey Gatzman in 2009, and they had a son that same year. After the separation, custody of the children went to Casey, but Colin remained actively involved in his son's care and life. On May 29, 2016, Colin married Bree, and together they started a family with Bree's daughter, Kay. Colin embraced the role of Kay's father, treating her as his own, which deeply endeared her to his family. In April 2017, Bree and Colin welcomed their son, John Patrick, followed by their daughter, Lonnie, in August 2018. After 14 years of service, Colin retired from the Marines and began studying electrical engineering at Arizona State University. He also managed to balance his studies with his responsibilities as a parent, such as helping Kay with distance learning. By this time, the family had settled in Gulf Breeze, Florida, a community recognized for its safety and family-friendly environment. Despite outward appearances of stability, underlying issues were present in Bree and Colin's relationship. She confided to her brother, Eric, that her relationship with Colin was strained. When Eric visited to help mediate, Colin reportedly joked, both privately and in front of Bree, that they got along because they were both narcissistic psychopaths. Eric also noticed Bree felt burdened as the family's sole financial provider, while Colin focused on his studies and childcare. Although Eric encouraged Bree to leave the relationship, she hesitated. Her concerns include that Colin could use her mental health history and his family's finances to gain a legal advantage in a custody battle. In April 2021, she attempted to end her life by overdosing on pills and alcohol while speaking on the phone with Eric. Panicked, Eric contacted Colin, who was at home with Bree but reportedly did not help her. He ultimately called emergency services, and she was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility for 10 days. A month later, she returned to the facility for another week. During her recovery, Bree attributed much of her emotional distress to job-related stress and accused Colin of interfering with her work, which she said exacerbated her difficulties. However, she never publicly accused him of psychological, physical, or emotional abuse. After her hospitalization, she joined an intensive outpatient program and resumed her career at the Naval Air Station in Pensacola. In her role as an assistant to the command chief, Bree was able to continue her treatment while serving under limited-duty sailor status. In the months leading up to the tragedy, Bree began seeking legal assistance. On Wednesday, September 8, 2021, she reached out to a group of mothers on a messaging app, asking for recommendations for a lawyer. She mentioned that the situation could escalate, as it involved disputes over children and property. At 12:53 p.m. that same day, Bree called 911 to report a domestic dispute with her husband, Colin, and requested police assistance at their home. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived at the scene. Colin, her husband, was calmly sitting in a beach chair at the end of the driveway. He informed the officers that Bree had a shotgun, a pistol in the bedroom, and admitted that he also had a firearm in his truck. Colin emphasized that Bree was the one who had called the police. When the officers asked about her whereabouts, he led one of them to the home's entrance and pointed toward the kitchen. As the officer entered, Bree's young son approached, curiously asking about the officer's equipment. Shortly afterward, Bree appeared, looking visibly frustrated. The police officer explained that they could not intervene immediately unless there were obvious injuries or specific evidence of violence. Bree responded bitterly, sarcastically stating that she would make things clearer next time. The officer attempted to de-escalate the situation, explaining that without a court order or restraining order, they could not prevent Colin from seeing or taking the children, especially since 2 of them were biologically his. When asked if she wanted to file a formal complaint, she declined, saying she just wanted to leave the house with her children. The officer informed her that he would speak to Colin while she gathered her belongings. While the officers were speaking with Colin, Bree began transferring items from Colin's truck to hers. Noticing this, Colin firmly stated that he would not allow her to take the children. He argued that he was their primary caregiver and claimed that he intended to take them to his parents' home in Georgia for a few days to let tensions cool down. He also denied having any intention of keeping the children away from Bree. One of the officers advised Colin that, as long as no violence was involved, parenting disputes were not matters for police intervention. When asked if he wanted to file a formal report, he agreed. The officers retrieved paperwork from their patrol vehicle and provided forms to both parties. When Bree saw her form, she asked what she should do if her husband hit her after they left. The officer advised her to use her phone's camera to document any evidence. The officers then departed. A few hours later, around 5 p.m., there was another 911 call from their home, this time from Colin. When the police arrived again, they found Colin outside, holding the youngest child. He told the officers that Bree was refusing to let him back into the house. She then went outside and tried to take the child from his arms. The officers intervened and asked Bree to go back inside to allow for a calm discussion. After confirming that Colin lived in and co-owned the house, an officer informed him that he had the legal right to enter the property, though they discouraged him from using force. The officer emphasized that Colin's access to the home was a lawful right. Concerned about another confrontation, he requested that the officer accompany him inside. Colin explained that Bree had attempted to take the child into the house, but the child had started screaming, refusing to go in without him. When the officer asked if any physical conflict had occurred, Colin said no but mentioned that the situation was part of a long-standing dispute that had lasted for years. Bree, on the other hand, told the officers that they were discussing divorce and claimed Colin intended to take the children to Georgia. She further accused him of being physically aggressive, adding that the earlier police visit had failed to protect her. She also alleged that Colin had contacted her superiors at work and possibly made claims of emotional abuse. The officer reiterated to Bree that she could not legally prevent Colin from entering his own home. He suggested they work out a temporary arrangement, such as staying in separate bedrooms and minimizing contact, for the well-being of their children. However, Bree refused, expressing concern that allowing Colin inside could lead to more violence. She again brought up her previous allegations of abuse and expressed fear of being harmed. The officer advised her to document any future incidents, but it was clear Bree was seeking more than just advice. She wanted protection that the current system was not equipped to provide. When the officer suggested that everyone enter the house together, Bree refused. The officer then turned to Colin, who calmly provided the children's information. During the exchange, he mentioned Bree's mental health issues. Police confirmed this and said that he had previously intervened in an incident at their home in March, when Bree attempted to harm herself. Police reminded Colin of the same advice they had previously given him, to remain separated within the home for the safety of everyone involved. He also pointed out that standing outside in the intense heat with a small child amidst biting mosquitoes was unsustainable. Before heading inside again, Colin asked the officer to retrieve his wallet, which Bree had allegedly taken from his vehicle. At the door, Bree met the officer. When asked about the wallet, she denied having it and claimed she had only taken Colin's credit card. The officer reminded her that a wallet is personal property, not something to be shared in marriage, and instructed her to return it if she had taken it. In a calm but firm tone, the officer told Bree she had to allow Colin and their daughter back into the house. Bree agreed, but only on the condition that Colin would not harass her or the children. The officer reassured her that if anything happened, she could call them again. As the officer prepared to leave, he returned to inform Colin that Bree claimed she did not know where the wallet was. Colin just smiled and implied that he would let the matter slide. But in reality, nothing was resolved satisfactorily. Less than 2 hours later, at exactly 6:22 p.m., a third and final 911 call came from their residence. Colin James Turner, just 33 years old, had been fatally shot. The final fatal gunshot rang out while the 911 operator was still on the line. On the porch, officers found Bree, then 34, sitting calmly. As they approached, she spontaneously confessed that she had shot her husband. She was taken into custody without resistance. When asked about the children, she said she had taken them to a neighbor who lived a few houses down. Paramedics checked her over while officers ensured that she was physically stable. When asked if she could breathe properly or needed medical care, she didn't respond, so emergency personnel were instructed to evaluate her. Bree was brought to the police station for questioning. The interrogation was slow, interrupted by long silences and frequent bouts of crying. During the interview, Bree opened up about the state of her marital relationship. She said Colin was the primary caregiver for their children and admitted that she believed she had little chance of winning custody due to her history of mental health struggles. She revealed that Colin had threatened to take the children to Georgia and had physically assaulted her. He had also warned that if she reported him, no one would believe her because of her mental health issues, calling her crazy. Bree confessed that she had removed the batteries from the garage door opener to stop Colin from leaving with the children. She claimed that Colin only pretended to care about her mental health as a way to manipulate her, especially after she decided to file for divorce. She mentioned that she had a legal appointment scheduled for the next day. She also mentioned that she had an appointment with a lawyer scheduled for the next day. When asked what had happened just before the attack, Bree said her memory after the second police visit was hazy. She recalled Colin attempting to enter the house through the garage but failing because the way was blocked. However, she said he then used a side door to enter the house. She claimed she tried to stop him, but her next clear memory was knocking on a neighbor's door. She remembered leaving her children there to ensure their safety before returning home to help her husband. Investigators pressed her for a more comprehensive account, but she could only provide scattered details. She said she returned to the garage and saw blood everywhere. Throughout the questioning, Bree repeatedly asked to call her father. Eventually, she was allowed to make the call, which lasted 18 minutes and consisted mostly of sobbing. Her father tried to comfort her, suggesting she would likely spend the night in jail and urging her to seek help if she felt like harming herself again. He reassured her that things could improve and told her to stay strong and look for hope. Toward the end of the call, Bree asked if her father could take custody of her two youngest children. He didn't give a definitive answer, suggesting instead that they would need to discuss it with Colin's mother. He also advised her to cooperate with a public defender if necessary until a more suitable legal option became available. At the end of the call, Bree painfully confesses she doesn't know what's worse, knowing that Colin is dead or realizing that she was the one who killed him. A month later, in early October 2021, Bree was indicted by a Santa Rosa County grand jury for first-degree premeditated murder in connection to the death of her husband, Colin. Prosecutors had not yet decided whether to seek life imprisonment or the death penalty. On October 16, Colin's family and friends gathered for a military funeral to honor his 14 years of service in the U.S. Marine Corps. During the ceremony, the American flag symbolizing his service was presented to his eldest son, Brody Turner. The youngest children of his were adopted by his parents, who always strived to love and support him despite enduring an irreparable loss. After 3 years of delays, Bree's long-awaited trial began on Tuesday, September 24, 2024, at the Santa Rosa County Courthouse. Now 37 years old, Bree faced accusations of committing a premeditated and calculated act of murder. The prosecution carefully outlined the events of September 8, 2021, arguing that Bree intentionally killed her husband following a day of escalating conflict. Meanwhile, the defense presented a drastically different narrative, asserting that Bree was a victim of battered woman syndrome. They argued that she had endured years of psychological and emotional abuse from Colin, who had become increasingly unstable after suffering a traumatic brain injury during his military service. The defense maintained that he posed a significant threat to her and their children. Over 4 days, the court heard testimony from various witnesses. The jury and those in the courtroom reviewed full body cam footage from responding officers, which captured their interactions on the day of the incident. The recordings revealed Bree's sarcasm, Colin's calm demeanor, and the chilling 911 call during which gunshots were recorded in real time. Every officer involved testified, including one officer who described the crime scene in detail, recounting the site of the garage, blood, Colin's body slumped in a chair, and a holstered weapon nearby. A crime scene analyst presented a series of photographs to help jurors visualize where Colin's body was found. Evidence collected included shell casings, bullet fragments, and Colin's phone, which was still connected to the 911 operator, lying beneath him. Prescriptions for Bree's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and mental health treatment were submitted as evidence, along with testimony from her supervisor, Craig Forum, from the Pensacola Naval Station. Craig explained that Bree had been placed on limited duty due to mental health issues. He said that on the day of the shooting, Bree did not show up for work, and Colin called him to inform him that Bree had cut off the family's financial access and damaged the electronics in the house. Colin also told Craig that she had missed therapy sessions and that he was considering moving the children to Georgia. Craig testified that Colin remained calm and spoke in a composed manner throughout the call. He also provided Colin with contact information for a family counselor. Soon after, he spoke to Bree, who accused her husband of lying and being unreasonable in taking the children away. On the trial's second day, forensic pathologist Dr. Diana Oleski was called to testify for the prosecution. Although she did not personally perform Colin's autopsy, she reviewed the results and formed her conclusion. The autopsy revealed that Colin had been shot 4 times, all from behind. The bullets entered between his shoulders and chest. One particularly devastating shot passed through his left shoulder, exited the side of his neck, and lodged in his right wrist. The injuries caused extensive trauma, including punctured lungs, fractured ribs, damage to cervical vertebrae, a ruptured spleen, spinal cord injuries, and damage to the pericardium, the heart's protective membrane. Diana concluded that Colin would have survived for only a few minutes following the pericardial injury. When the defense attorney asked if there was any evidence to indicate that Colin's arm was broken, since he had claimed during the 911 call that Bree had tried to break his arm, Diana responded that there were no signs of injuries consistent with that statement. Eric, Bree's brother, was the next to testify. He recounted a phone conversation with Bree months earlier, on the day she attempted to end her life. During that call, she told him she had taken pills mixed with alcohol. Eric stated that when he informed Colin of this, Colin showed no concern and took no action to help, prompting Eric to step in and call for assistance. Eric also mentioned that Bree had always feared losing her children, believing Colin's family's wealth and legal resources would work against her. On the day of the attack, Eric said Bree was especially anxious because she had an upcoming surgery and feared that Colin would use that time to take the children. He recalled speaking to Bree several times that day, noting her mood alternated between calm and distressed. During their final 45-minute call, Eric said he overheard Bree arguing with Colin, followed by shouting and the sound of objects being thrown. He claimed that Bree had then picked up a weapon. When asked how Eric knew this, he hesitated, saying he believed Bree had told him. Eric begged her to leave with the children, but she didn't listen. The call ended with Bree saying that she was not going to take the kids, followed by the sound of gunshots, crying children, and Bree repeatedly saying that she had killed him and that she needed to call the police. However, Eric's testimony was inconsistent under cross-examination. His account differed from his initial statements to detectives in Pennsylvania. He attributed these contradictions to the claim that his first interview had not been recorded, a claim the detective denied. With that, the prosecution rested its case. The defense initially planned to present Bree's defense through testimony from a mental health expert and Bree herself to explain battered woman syndrome. However, they unexpectedly changed strategy, opting not to present these testimonies and offering no public explanation for their decision. Instead, the defense called James, Bree's ex-husband and the father of her eldest daughter, Kay. James testified about the incident on the day of the shooting. He stated that he exchanged text messages with Colin and later received a phone call from Bree. During the call, Bree had told him that he needed to come get Kay and that she had just shot Colin. When he had asked why, she had responded that she didn't know. James immediately went to pick up his daughter. James also testified in court that he had always thought highly of Colin as a stepfather and that Kay had spoken positively about him. On the third day of the trial, proceedings were interrupted by a hurricane warning, delaying closing arguments until Friday, September 27th. During the prosecution's closing argument, they emphasized that Bree showed no visible injuries on the day of the shooting. They argued that Bree deliberately provoked Colin, secretly filmed the confrontation on her phone, and kept her brother on the line during the incident. They contended that her motive was not self-defense but a desire to assert control. The prosecution concluded that, being unable to provoke aggression from Colin, Bree attacked him 4 times in the back without realizing he was on a 911 call. The defense argued that Colin had been walking around the house with a firearm and suggested he hid the weapon in his truck before police arrived. They referenced Colin's 911 call, where he claimed Bree tried to break his arm, a claim contradicted by the autopsy. One of the defense attorneys mocked Colin's actions during the call, asserting that, as a Marine, he should have handled the situation differently, further implying that his response would have been ridiculed by others in his military unit. The defense ultimately claimed that Bree resorted to attacking Colin because law enforcement had repeatedly failed to protect her despite her pleas for help. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict. During the sentencing hearing, the judge allowed Colin's parents to speak about the impact of the incident. Colin's mother expressed gratitude for having custody of her grandchildren and stated her intent to adopt them. She condemned Bree not only for taking her son's life but also for attempting to tarnish his reputation. Colin's father spoke of his sadness and disappointment in Bree's actions, sharing that the children were doing well in school and surrounded by love. The judge then sentenced Bree Kristen Kuhn to life in prison. Although the verdict has been announced, the case is not over yet. On October 3, 2024, Bree's legal team filed an appeal with the Florida Court of Appeals, challenging her conviction and requesting a new trial. Meanwhile, Bree was discharged from the U.S. Navy with a general discharge under honorable conditions after 17 years of service, thus avoiding further military disciplinary action.
On the morning of July 4, 2011, the body of a woman was found 5 miles outside of Wayland, Massachusetts. A cyclist, who was enjoying the scenery near a swampy area, noticed something unusual and decided to investigate. To her shock, she discovered the lifeless body of a young girl lying in the grass and mud. It was clear that the girl had not drowned. Instead, she had suffered a brutal fate. There was a noticeable wound on her neck, and a bungee cord was entangled in her hair. The bystander, however, still in shock, called emergency services to report what she witnessed. When law enforcement arrived, they pulled the body out of the water and examined it before sending it for forensic analysis. Since the girl had only been in the water for a short time, her appearance had not changed much. Officers identified her as 18-year-old Lauren Astley, who had been reported missing the night before. Lauren did not come home or attend a meeting with her friends. CCTV footage showed her entering the shopping center, where she worked as a sales clerk at Tenamanan on July 3rd and leaving at 6:51 p.m. after her shift ended. At that time, she was on the phone with someone. Sadly, this was the last confirmed sighting of her, and she has not been heard from since. Malcolm Astley, Lauren's father, started to feel anxious because his daughter was always punctual and reliable. If she said she would be home at a specific time, she always did. She never changed her plans without a reason, and usually, she would inform him if she was going to be late. Understanding that something might have gone wrong, Malcolm quickly alerted the police about her disappearance. The police quickly began the search for Lauren. At the same time, her family and friends joined in to look for her. News of her disappearance spread rapidly through word of mouth among their acquaintances. Eventually, her car was discovered in a local beach parking lot. The windows were down, and her personal belongings, including a purse and a laptop, were left inside the car. However, Lauren was still missing, and it was uncertain where she might have gone after abandoning her vehicle in that condition. When Malcolm learned that his daughter's car had been found, he quickly drove to the location to search for her. He walked along the shoreline, using a flashlight to scan the water as if he might find her there. Soon after, Lauren's friends arrived, choosing to stay overnight at the site in hopes of being the first to see her. They spent the entire night searching the area, wondering where Lauren could have gone. It was hard for them to believe that the person they had been talking and laughing with just moments ago could simply vanish. Tragically, just 12 hours later, Lauren's body was discovered. The first person the officers contacted was her father. They shared the devastating news with him and asked him to come for identification. Malcolm struggled to accept that the girl on the pathologist's table was his daughter. However, once he composed himself, he officially recognized her. Before him lay his young and vibrant daughter, who had so much potential ahead of her. Heartbroken, he faced the painful reality and knew he had two important tasks: to inform his ex-wife about the tragedy and to find the person responsible for his daughter's death. When the devastating news reached the city, people were in disbelief. Friends and family collectively asserted that Lauren had no enemies or anyone who wished her harm. The only person that some began to suspect was her ex-boyfriend, Nathaniel Fujita. His name was mentioned cautiously, as everyone recognized his deep love for Lauren and believed he could never harm her. Nevertheless, the investigations proceeded. Lauren and Nathaniel were the envy of their entire high school. She was a petite, pretty brown girl who stood out for her energy and uniqueness, and he was a tall, ambitious soccer player adored by many girls. although the two had known each other since childhood. They revealed their feelings later on. Their relationship began in high school and lasted 3 years. It was a colorful romance with all the typical ups and downs. They fought and made up, broke up and got back together. Both had strong personalities, but they tried to cherish the bond that existed between them. At least, this was true for the first few years of their relationship. Lauren Astley was born in 1993 in Boston. She was the only child of Mary and Malcolm, which meant that both parents focused all their attention on her. Since they both worked as teachers, they instilled important values in her from an early age, the most significant being their desire for their daughter to grow up to be a good person. When Lauren was 6 years old, her parents divorced. However, this did not affect her upbringing. Both continued to care for her and support her in all their endeavors. Lauren was a remarkable young woman, constantly engaged in various activities that kept her busy. She was passionate about tennis and soccer, sang in a musical group, and was a member of the Youth Symphony Orchestra. Additionally, she took part in her church choir, worked as a counselor at a children's camp. No school or town concert was complete without her involvement, and many were amazed by her irrepressible energy. She was active, everywhere at once. Another aspect of Lauren's hobbies was her social activism. At the age of 12, she helped the victims of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, Louisiana, and returned to the area 2 more times for similar missions. With her big, kind heart, open to the world and people, she cared for others more than she cared for herself. Those around her knew they could rely on her anytime for help or advice. Nathaniel attended high school with Lauren. He was a standout player on the school soccer team and showed great potential, dreaming of a future in sports. He was known as a diligent student in the life of the party, the eldest son of Beth and Toma Fujita. His family enjoyed prosperity and some fame in certain circles. His father was a renowned guitarist and a professor at Berklee College of Music in Boston, and was known for his unconventional approach to life. Interestingly, Nathaniel and Lauren developed a romantic relationship after she interviewed Nathaniel's father for a school project. After that, she began visiting their home more often, and once they stopped hiding their feelings, their parents began to communicate, visit each other. In the beginning, the first 2 years of Nathaniel and Lauren's relationship were wonderful. They were both attractive and their bond attracted a lot of attention. They enjoyed many activities together, going out, playing sports, studying, and more. However, over time, their closeness started to become overwhelming. Nathaniel grew more controlling, refusing to let Lauren go out by herself and becoming jealous over small things. He often imagined threats that didn't exist and wanted all of her attention for himself, leading to frequent arguments. Despite these issues, Lauren never reported any physical abuse. Instead, their relationship turned into an emotional roller coaster. Losing its sense of peace, this instability was uncomfortable for them both. Yet they struggled to regain the happy feelings they once had. As Lauren neared the end of her schooling, she started to consider her future. She made a list of the strengths and weaknesses of her relationship with Nathaniel and realized it was time to part ways. His behavior around her had changed, and her mother had unintentionally influenced her perception of their relationship, projecting her own ideas about a future with Nathaniel onto Lauren. Additionally, the upcoming college enrollment weighed heavily on her decision. Their paths were already separating. Lauren was applying to Elon University in North Carolina, while Nathaniel had received an invitation to play soccer at Trinity College in Connecticut. On April 1st, 2011, which was also her birthday, Lauren made a significant decision. She believed it was the right time to embrace changes and begin anew, as everyone had new relationships and activities to occupy their minds and help alleviate sadness. However, Nathaniel did not feel the same way. He experienced profound feelings of loss and loneliness. His enthusiasm for college had faded. He no longer engaged in practicing or socializing. Instead, he spent his days lying on the couch watching TV. Nathaniel slipped into a deep depression that became overwhelming for him. Everyone noticed that the once active, energetic young man had become withdrawn and depressed. He turned to alcohol and marijuana to escape his reality. It was difficult for Lauren to witness this change and to feel responsible for it. She sought advice from her friends on how to help him, but they all suggested that she should not interfere and instead give him the space to heal alone. They warned that her involvement could be seen as an attempt to fix him, which might make things worse. After graduation, Ashley's kindness and eagerness to help led to unexpected trouble. She and her friends organized a large party for about 150 people, held under a vast dome where everyone danced and had a good time. Nathaniel was among the guests, but he arrived quite drunk. When he saw Lauren dancing in the center of the dance floor, he attempted to talk to her. She politely asked him to leave her alone so he wouldn't ruin the party, explaining that they had already discussed everything before and that she didn't want to engage with him in his current state. Despite her request, he insisted on starting over the conversation. As time went on, Nathaniel's mood worsened, and he grew increasingly aggressive. Eventually, in a fit of anger, he punched a pole supporting the structure, causing it to shake and collapse, which ruined the celebration. The crowd was upset, wanted Nathaniel to leave the party. Later, Lauren approached her mother, crying and revealing that her ex-boyfriend would not leave her alone and was following her everywhere. She explained that at the graduation event, he prevented anyone from dancing with her and acted very badly. He was upset that she was happy without him. When the police learned that Lauren was missing, they immediately began questioning everyone close to her. All evidence pointed to Nathaniel, as he seemed to be the only one with a motive to hurt her. However, his friends all insisted that he was innocent. The officers had encountered previous cases where crimes were committed by unexpected individuals. Nathaniel and his mother met the detectives at their front door. During the discussion, Nathaniel appeared confused and upset about the sudden disappearance of someone he cared about. He shared that he had seen her recently around 7 p.m. when she stopped to talk to him in her car. Their conversation was pleasant but short, lasting no more than 5 minutes. He claimed that he was at home when Lauren disappeared and did not leave, but his alibi was hard to confirm since he was alone. His mother supported his story, mentioning that she had also seen Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend that day when Lauren visited the mall where she worked part-time. The mother was concerned about Nathaniel's well-being, which is why she had asked Lauren to speak with him. Nathaniel's parents had already consulted a psychiatrist, but the therapy sessions were unhelpful. Their son had become completely apathetic, merely going through the motions of life. His mother hoped that Lauren's words would inspire him or at least help him regain some pride so he could move forward. This request made things more complicated for Lauren, but the meeting was supposed to be brief, and so it remained under the radar. After her meeting with Nathaniel's mother, Lauren had a phone conversation with Nathaniel, which was captured by the mall's security cameras. Concerned about her ex-boyfriend, she reached out to him and made plans to meet at 7:05 p.m. Lauren arrived at Fujita House and texted, "Here." The information Nathaniel and Beth provided was indeed valuable to the police. However, it was unclear where Lauren had gone afterward and why her car was left unlocked at the beach. The case became clearer when Lauren Ashley's body was found. The detectives decided to visit Nathaniel again. However, he was not home this time. They didn't need him there, as they had a search warrant to gather evidence to support their theory about his possible involvement in the murder. Their examination began in the garage, where the specialist quickly noticed signs of a violent incident. Bloodstains were found on the floor, and several elastic cords hanging prominently on the wall matched those tangled in the victim's hair. Additional traces of blood were found throughout the house, including faint splatters on the doorknob, kitchen floor, kitchen sink, and bathroom sink. It was clear someone had attempted to clean up the mess, but did so hastily and poorly. In the basement, detectives discovered a black gym bag containing wet and muddy tennis shoes. In Nathaniel's bedroom, they found a hidden stash with a pair of bloody shoes and wet, bloody clothes. The mud on the shoes appeared to match the mud from the swamp where Lauren's body was found, but samples would need to be sent to a lab for official analysis. Experts later confirmed the detectives' suspicions, revealing that the blood found in Fujita House belonged to Lauren Ashley. They gathered compelling evidence linking Nathaniel to his ex-girlfriend's murder, but his location remained unknown, leading to him being declared a wanted person. The investigation advanced rapidly, and just a few hours later, the suspect was located. He had been staying with a cousin in a nearby town. On the morning of July 5th, 2011, Nathaniel was arrested on suspicion of murder. He appeared detached and quiet during his arrest and did not resist. However, he also refused to cooperate with investigators. During questioning, he remained silent about the charges against him. The detectives speculated that either he couldn't justify his actions or he was afraid to reveal too much, which is why he chose not to speak. Investigators believe that Lauren visited her ex-boyfriend after meeting with his mother because she was worried about him and wanted to cheer him up. They later went to Fujita's garage, where a fight may have occurred. During this altercation, Nathaniel attacked Lauren and began to strangle her with a bungee cord. After killing her, he drove her car to the beach and disposed of the car keys in a storm drain, which were later recovered. Nathaniel then returned home, loaded Lauren's body into his car, and drove it to a swamp. He attempted to cover up the crime. Although Nathaniel had not been physically violent with Lauren before, he had shown moments of uncontrolled aggression. His actions seemed to be driven by an inability to accept the breakup and feelings of resentment. On August 23, 2011, Nathaniel faced a preliminary hearing where he was charged with first-degree felony assault and battery using a dangerous weapon. When asked if he would plead guilty, he quietly said no. It soon became evident that his lawyers had acted unethically and had established a questionable strategy for his defense. Consequently, the prosecutor requested that the court deny bail for the defendant, and the court approved this request. On February 13, 2013, during the trial, Nathaniel's lawyer, William Sullivan, argued that his client was not mentally competent to stand trial due to insanity. He acknowledged that a murder had occurred, but emphasized that on the evening of July 3, 2011, Nathaniel had a severe episode of clinical depression that led to a psychotic breakdown. This episode impaired his ability to understand his actions during the attack on Lauren. Nathaniel's friends supported the defense's case by describing noticeable changes in his behavior, indicating that he had stopped socializing and lost interest in activities he once loved, like soccer, which he had even practiced despite being sick. Following his breakup with Lauren, it appeared that he transformed dramatically overnight. The psychiatrist who treated Nathaniel also testified at the court hearing. He diagnosed Nathaniel and recommended medication and therapy, but Nathaniel refused both. During the trial, it was proposed that the defendant's mental health issues might have originated from his painful breakup, but were mainly caused by his multiple head injuries from sports. The breakup worsened his condition and led to a severe episode. However, the prosecution disagreed with the defense's claims. Prosecutor Lisa McGovern argued that the defendant was aware of his actions, acted deliberately, and committed the crime for selfish reasons. Nathaniel was found to have been continuously stalking Lauren, causing her distress. On that particular day, just a few hours before her work ended, he showed up at the shopping center and watched her, as confirmed by CCTV footage. Lauren's situation, which arose at his mother's request, gave Nathaniel the chance to act on his criminal intentions. Witness testimonies supported the prosecution's case, and Nathaniel showed no remorse for his actions. An eyewitness saw Nathaniel returning home on the night of the incident with music playing in his car. A cousin also provided damaging information about him. She recalled that on the evening of July 3rd, her brother had called her to hang out, but she was busy and declined. He became very upset, expressing a desire to distract himself, but it seemed that didn't help. The following day, after news of Lauren's death broke, she reached out to him to ask if he was aware of it. He responded that no one would ever find out the truth about her death or the location of the murder weapon. He also acknowledged that he had driven his ex-girlfriend's car to the town beach. Recognizing that Nathaniel was implicated in the situation, his sister urged him to confess. In 2009, after Nathaniel and Lauren break up, an interesting incident occurred. Lauren went to a disco with friends, where a guy showed interest in her. Following the breakup, she decided to give this new guy a chance. However, Nathaniel, her ex, witnessed this and violently confronted the new man, threatening to harm him if he got close to Lauren again. Nathan's jealousy was evident. When he drank alcohol, he became unpredictable and dangerous. This situation revealed Nathaniel's violent tendencies and suggested that he could be a suspect. Additionally, new disturbing details emerged. Lauren's body showed wounds that had been inflicted prior to her death, including evident defensive wounds, which suggested that she had attempted to fight back. A forensic psychiatrist brought in by the prosecution evaluated the defendant's mental state. Unlike the earlier assessment, he concluded that Nathaniel was of sound mind and capable of making rational decisions at the time of the crime. The intense conflict between the prosecution and the defense hinged on whether Nathaniel would be deemed insane. If found insane, his punishment would be significantly less severe. While this wouldn't eliminate the charges against him, it would greatly reduce his level of responsibility. The trial was emotionally charged, as family members from both sides attended. Previously friends, they were now each suffering in their own way. Nathaniel's parents were in tears throughout the trial, struggling to comprehend what had occurred and feeling overwhelming guilt for their son. The burden of his actions weighed heavily on his loved ones. Mary and Malcolm were devastated by the loss of their only daughter. Meanwhile, Lauren was enduring unimaginable pain caused by the man she loved. Experts determined that she lived for several minutes after the rope around her neck was tightened. Lauren's mother desperately sought to understand why this tragedy happened to her daughter and how long it had been in the making. On March 7, 2013, after a 3-week trial, Nathaniel Fujita was found guilty on all counts. The jury took just 1 day to reach their final decision. The 20-year-old received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. Following the verdict, Lauren's father approached Nathaniel's parents and embraced them, showcasing his strong character and compassion. Both families had experienced a profound loss. In response, Mary and Malcolm Astley founded the Lauren Dunn Astley Memorial Fund to educate teenagers about healthy relationships. They believe that Nathaniel's crime could have been avoided. Lauren's family is now committed to raising awareness about preventing relationship violence and coping with breakups. In 2024, the State Superior Court ended mandatory life sentences without parole for offenders under 20 at the time of their crime. As a result, Nathaniel now has a chance for freedom, although no hearing has been confirmed as of June 2025. In March 2025, Nathaniel Fujita requested a retrial in the Superior Court, with prosecutors responding, but the outcome has yet to be decided. Some believe that love can easily turn to hate. Obsessive love, mixed with jealousy and selfishness, can sometimes lead to irrational actions. The tragic experiences of the Fueta and Ashley families illustrate this point. A woman was discovered in her home under mysterious and alarming conditions. There were no leads or evidence for detectives to pursue, making it seem like the case would remain unsolved. However, an unexpected phone call changed everything. With one surprising clue, detectives revealed a truth that nobody could have anticipated. Kathy Blair was born on May 3, 1961 in California. She grew up in a caring family with her parents, a brother, and a sister. From a young age, she developed a strong love for the arts, especially music. Singing was her greatest passion. When it came time to choose a career, Kathy made her decision without hesitation. She enrolled at the University of Texas to study vocal performance and moved to Austin. After graduating, Kathy became a music teacher and a choir instructor at a Christian church. She loved her job, and her students admired her greatly. They recognized her deep passion for music, which inspired them. Throughout her life, Kathy was married 2 times, but both marriages ended in divorce. She raised her 2 children, a son and a daughter, as a single parent. In 2013, at the age of 52, Kathy relocated to a new home in a peaceful and safe suburb of Austin. She had long envisioned a place that met all her needs, and she had finally discovered the ideal one. By this time, her children were adults and living independently, while Kathy remained active in her music career, continued to lead the choir. In December 2014, Joseph Hargis, her 27-year-old son, came home to stay with his mother for a few weeks before his next military deployment. He wanted to spend some quality time with her. On December 5th, Joseph went out to meet friends and didn't come back until nearly noon the following day. When he entered the house, he called for his mom but was met with silence. Feeling uneasy, He started to check each room until he reached Kathy's bedroom. What he discovered there was horrifying. She was lying on the floor next to her bed in a pool of blood. Joseph instantly realized she was no longer alive. In a panic, he ran outside and called the police. When investigators arrived, they confirmed that Kathy had been dead for several hours. The large amount of blood at the scene indicated that this was a murder, not an accident. While medical experts examined the body, police began processing the crime scene. They immediately noticed that the drawers from a large jewelry box in her bedroom were pulled out and on the floor. It appeared the killer had taken some of Kathy's jewelry, which led detectives to initially suspect robbery as the motive. However, this theory felt questionable. For one, the intruder had not taken anything else. Valuable items like Kathy's laptop and phone were left untouched and in plain sight. The house showed no signs of being searched for more valuables, indicating the focus was solely on the jewelry. The timing of the break-in was unusual. Nighttime burglaries are rare. Most thieves typically break in during the day when people are at work. Additionally, this neighborhood was known as one of the safest in the city, making such crimes unexpected. Another puzzling aspect was the order of events. It appeared that the killer first murdered Kathy and then searched her home for valuables. Bloodstains on the jewelry box drawers and elsewhere in the bedroom indicated that the attack occurred before the robbery. This implies that the intruder attacked Kathy immediately upon entering her bedroom. There were no signs of forced entry at the front door, but investigators discovered that the back door was left unlocked. When they questioned Joseph about it, he mentioned that his mother frequently kept that door open. This led detectives to consider whether this was truly a robbery or if something more sinister was at play. They began to wonder if the killer had intended to murder Kathy from the start. If so, it raised a troubling possibility. Could the perpetrator have known her? Forensic experts faced significant challenges in their investigation, as they were unable to find any evidence to identify the killer. There were no fingerprints or DNA, leaving them without any leads. The only clue they discovered was a partial shoe print in Kathy's bedroom, found in her blood. Medical examiners concluded that Kathy had died from multiple stab wounds and exhibited signs of strangulation. Importantly, there was no indication of abuse, which strengthened detectives' belief that this crime was not random, but rather personal in nature. With no physical evidence to investigate, police turned their attention to Kathy's close connections, searching for anyone who might have a motive to harm her. They began with her son, as he had the opportunity to commit the crime. However, after verifying his alibi, detectives quickly eliminated him as a suspect. He had been with friends all night, and this was confirmed. Next, they interviewed Kathy's friends and colleagues in hopes of finding any conflicts or grievances, but everyone they spoke to stated that Kathy had no enemies. Kathy was well-liked, avoided conflicts, and dedicated most of her time to the choir. Just when it seemed like the investigation had reached a standstill, detectives uncovered a new lead. Several of Kathy's close friends revealed that she often talked about her second ex-husband, whom she had divorced 4 years prior to her murder. Kathy described their breakup as difficult. Her ex-husband continually harassed her and wouldn't accept their separation. She even confided in friends that she was concerned for her safety and requested that they not share her new address with him. Detectives located the ex-husband living not far from Austin. When they approached him, his reaction was alarming. As soon as they mentioned Kathy's death, he asked, "Was she shot?" This was suspicious. When they inquired about his activities that night, he claimed to have been in his RV for a short getaway. He allowed detectives to search his RV without a warrant, but they found no evidence, no weapons, no blood, and no signs tying him to the crime. With no solid evidence, they couldn't charge him. He remained a person of interest, but detectives had to keep searching for other potential suspects. A few days later, the detectives received an unexpected call from one of Kathy's friends with some unusual information. She and a group had organized a memorial service for Kathy, and during the ceremony, an unfamiliar man stood up to speak. Immediately, the attendees felt something was off about him. His tone and mannerisms made everyone uncomfortable. Even more puzzling was that none of Kathy's closest friends recognized him. Eventually, one of Kathy's friends identified the man. The friend had seen him before as a sales clerk at a local women's clothing store. The police tracked him down for questioning. The man admitted he had never met Kathy. He mentioned he had read about her murder and felt compelled to attend the memorial. While his explanation was odd, there was no evidence linking him to the crime, so the detectives had to let him go and continued their search for the killer. For several days, the investigation stalled until an unexpected development changed everything. A man contacted the police, claiming he had important information. He explained that he had recently purchased a new scope for his hunting rifle, which included a thermal imaging camera. Eager to try it out, he took a walk in the early hours of December 6th, heading towards a wooded area near his neighborhood. While walking, he noticed a car slowly driving by, which then pulled over to the side of the road. Moments later, a man exited the vehicle and walked down a nearby street, disappearing into the night. At the time, he didn't think much about it, but when he later heard about Kathy's murder, a connection clicked in his mind. He realized that the man he saw was heading in the direction of her house. He remembered that his thermal camera had been recording during his walk, so he reviewed the footage. To his surprise, he found the recording of the man clearly visible as he walked away from the car. This type of imaging only showed the suspect's silhouette, making it very difficult to identify him. However, the video still provided useful information. The man appeared tall, broad-shouldered, and had a unique walking style. Additionally, the camera captured his car, which gave investigators hope that they could at least identify the type of vehicle. They compared the man's height and build to two main suspects, Kathy's ex-husband and a suspicious man from the memorial, but neither matched the silhouette or the car seen in the video. This left the detectives even more uncertain about the involvement of both men, putting them back at the beginning of their investigation. In the following days, investigators continued to review the footage, hoping to find useful clues and identify new suspects. However, their efforts yielded no significant results, and the case reached a frustrating standstill once again. Then, on December 15th, a breakthrough occurred. That morning, a caretaker checking on an elderly couple, Sydney and Billy Shelton, called the police after noticing something was off when she arrived at their home. The front door was wide open, and there were obvious signs of forced entry at the lock. Upon entering the house, she went to the bedroom and was met with a horrifying scene. The couple was lying motionless in a pool of blood. Without delay, she contacted the police. Medical examiners later confirmed that both victims had been stabbed multiple times, just like Kathy. Detectives also observed a disturbing detail. Their jewelry box had been ransacked, with drawers opened and jewelry missing. Similar to Kathy's case, nothing else of value was taken. The striking parallels between this crime and Kathy's murder could not be overlooked. Investigators suspected from the start that the same perpetrator might be involved. The victims lived only 15 minutes apart. Both attacks occurred at night while they were sleeping, and in each instance, the killer emptied the jewelry boxes but left other valuables behind. From the beginning, investigators suspected that Kathy's murder could be personal, possibly committed by someone she knew. However, they soon had to reconsider this possibility. What if the victims were chosen at random for some unknown reason? Detectives searched for any links between Kathy and the Sheltons' common friends, places they frequented, anything that could connect them. Unfortunately, they found nothing. Their lives had never overlapped. This led to a frightening realization. They might be facing a serial killer. Suddenly, the case was not just about solving a murder. It turned into a race against time before he struck again. Police reached out to everyone connected to the victims, hoping someone would remember even the smallest detail that could help them identify the killer. They encouraged people to share any information, no matter how trivial it seemed, and, eventually, this approach proved effective. One of Kathy's friends recalled a conversation they had a few months prior to her murder. Kathy had mentioned an uncomfortable encounter with a handyman hired by her landlord to perform repairs at her house. She expressed that not only was the work done poorly, but the handyman's behavior also made her feel uneasy. Detectives reached out to the landlord, who helped them find the worker's contact information. This led them to a local resident named Timothy Parlin. They quickly learned that Timothy's brother regularly attended the church where the Sheltons were members. and Timothy himself had also been seen there. As they researched Timothy's background, they discovered something troubling. He had a criminal record with multiple arrests for theft, primarily targeting jewelry. At the time of the investigation, Timothy was on parole and staying in a long-term hotel. When detectives visited him, he agreed to answer their questions but requested to talk outside in the hotel parking lot instead of in his room. Initially, Timothy claimed not to remember Kathy, but as detectives provided more details, he recalled doing some repair work at her house. He firmly stated he was not involved in her murder and provided an alibi, saying he was working the night shift at a convenience store when Kathy was killed. However, detectives noticed discrepancies. Timothy was much shorter than the figure seen in the thermal camera footage, and his car did not match the one observed that night. With no concrete evidence to link him to the crime, they left without any further leads. An unexpected turn of events occurred. When detectives checked Timothy's alibi with his employer, they found out he had been fired a week before Kathy's murder, indicating he couldn't have been at work that night. The detectives hurried back to the hotel, but Timothy had already left. His wife answered the door and let them search their room, leading to a significant discovery. They found a pawn shop receipt showing Timothy had sold jewelry on the same day as Kathy's murder. The detectives went directly to the pawn shop and confirmed that the jewelry belonged to Kathy. Additionally, security footage from the shop's parking lot revealed that Timothy had not arrived in his own car, indicating he was using another vehicle. Upon checking the license plates, the police discovered the car belonged to Timothy's sister. This was vital because it closely resembled the car seen on the thermal camera the night of Kathy's murder. With this information, detectives obtained a warrant to search the vehicle. Forensic experts then examined the car and found blood traces on the front seat and floor. Lab results confirmed the blood belonged to Kathy. Police arrested Timothy and brought him in for questioning. Despite facing substantial evidence, he refused to confess and kept repeating, "These hands have never killed anyone." The detectives interrogated him for hours, pressing him on the evidence, and eventually, he began to crack, but not in the way they anticipated. He maintained his innocence, but claimed to know the actual murderer, a man named Sean Gant Benalcazar. Investigators were doubtful. The case against Timothy was strong, and his sudden shift in blame seemed like a desperate attempt to avoid responsibility. Nevertheless, they decided to investigate Sean as a precaution. The evidence they uncovered did not indicate that Sean was a murderer. Sean, a 30-year-old former science teacher with a degree in microbiology, had no criminal history and lived several hundred miles away from Austin, making his connection to the case seem unlikely. However, detectives wanted to be completely certain, so they traveled to his town to interview him. During the questioning, Sean acknowledged that he had met Timothy a few months earlier and found him to be suspicious. Although they hadn't communicated much since then, Sean made a surprising revelation. He had been in Austin on the nights of both murders. Furthermore, he disclosed that he had stayed at Timothy's house during that time, adding to the confusion of the situation. Initially, Sean stated that Timothy left the house without saying anything on the night Kathy was murdered. However, just minutes later, he changed his account and admitted they had gone to Kathy's house together. He claimed that Timothy got out of the car and came back a few minutes later with a bag that was stained with blood. When Sean looked inside the bag, he saw some jewelry. At that moment, he understood that Timothy had done something awful, but he maintained that he had no knowledge of what would happen and had never intended to be involved in any crime. As detectives continued to question Sean, he requested to use the restroom, and they allowed him to leave the room. One of the investigators observed him as he walked away and realized that his stride, posture, and movements were strikingly similar to the figure seen on the thermal camera the night Kathy was murdered. This observation raised serious doubts about Sean's honesty. The detectives began to strongly suspect that Sean might be the actual killer, but without a confession, they lacked solid evidence to build a case against him. In contrast, they had some physical evidence linking Timothy to the crime, but with Sean, they had nothing at all. When he came back from the restroom, they continued to question him, doubting his account of what happened. They suggested that they didn't believe he had simply stayed in the car and even implied that Timothy might have forced him into Kathy's house under threat. This tactic worked, and after some hesitation, Sean finally confessed that he had gone into the house by himself. He said he entered with the intention of stealing valuables, while Timothy waited outside. He mentioned that he slipped in through the unlocked back door and started searching the rooms for items to take. In Kathy's bedroom, he spotted the jewelry box while Kathy was still asleep in bed. Sean initially maintained that he had carefully taken the valuables and left without harming Kathy. He even suggested that Timothy might have returned to the house after the robbery and killed Kathy for unknown reasons. However, the detectives didn't believe him. They discovered blood on the jewelry box, indicating that the killer had taken the valuables only after the murder, which completely contradicted Sean's story. They continued to question him, dismantling his lies one by one, until he finally confessed. Sean admitted to killing Kathy. He claimed that when he entered her bedroom, she woke up and lunged at him. In a panic, he grabbed a knife and stabbed her multiple times. After she was dead, he took the jewelry, hurried out of the house, and got back into his car. Detectives were skeptical of Sean's story. They found it difficult to believe that Kathy had suddenly lunged at him, trying to grab his knife. However, his confession was sufficient to arrest him. To build their case, they collected his shoes and had forensic experts analyze the soles, which matched the bloody footprint found in Kathy's bedroom perfectly. Despite this evidence, there was a significant issue regarding the murder of the elderly couple. When detectives asked Sean about it, his attitude changed completely. He requested a lawyer and refused to answer any more questions. With no direct evidence linking him to that murder, the investigators faced a dead end. They returned to Timothy, who had been arrested as an accomplice in Kathy's murder. Under Texas law, this meant he faced the same charges as Sean, even though he did not physically take part in the killing. Timothy acknowledged that he drove Sean to Kathy's house, but insisted he never got out of the car and had no idea Sean intended to kill her. However, he admitted to selling Kathy's stolen jewelry, which linked him directly to the crime. When detectives questioned him about the murder of Shelton's, he confessed that he and Sean had gone there to rob the house as well. Again, he maintained that he stayed in the car while Sean entered the house. Investigators looked into the possibility that Timothy was being honest. The thermal camera footage from Kathy's murder clearly showed only one person leaving the vehicle. If the same situation occurred in the second crime, it suggested that Sean had acted alone again. Ultimately, Timothy was charged with all 3 murders because of his involvement, despite not having directly committed the killings. Meanwhile, Sean faced official charges for Kathy's murder, but detectives had not yet been able to prove his connection to the second case. The court decided that Timothy and Sean would have separate trials. During Timothy's trial, he claimed he was not involved in the murders and was unaware that Sean intended to kill anyone. However, this did not alter the reality that he had driven Sean to both crime scenes and had benefited from selling stolen jewelry belonging to Kathy. Ultimately, in November 2018, the jury found Timothy Parlin guilty, resulting in a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. Sean's trial was considerably more complex. Unlike Timothy, who was connected to Kathy's case through physical evidence, Sean's case relied mainly on his confession, a shoe print discovered in Kathy's bedroom, and footage from thermal cameras. His lawyer quickly challenged the evidence, arguing that detectives had forced Sean to confess and pressured him to accept responsibility for a crime he didn't commit. The lawyer also maintained that the other evidence was merely circumstantial. Consequently, the jury was unable to agree on a verdict, leading the judge to declare a mistrial. Prosecutors continued their efforts, and a few months later, Sean faced a second trial. This time, the jury was persuaded of his guilt, and he received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for Kathy's murder. Although there were strong suspicions regarding the murders of Billy and Sidney Shelton, he was never officially charged with those crimes. Investigators remained convinced of his involvement, but they lacked sufficient evidence to file charges. In the end, both men faced justice, but many questions remained unanswered. Detectives could not figure out why Sean had killed his victims. If Kathy had truly woken up while he was in her bedroom, he could have easily escaped since it was completely dark, and she wouldn't have been able to identify him. It was clear that a simple burglary had turned into a brutal murder. Detectives struggled to understand the motive behind Billy and Sidney Shelton's deaths. They speculated that Sean might have had some interaction with them at church, possibly leading to a conflict that sparked his resentment, similar to what occurred with Kathy. However, this was just guesswork. In Sean's case, investigators could not dismiss the idea that he may have had no motive and simply wanted to kill. If that was true, it was likely he would have continued his spree if he hadn't been apprehended. Not all relationships are healthy. Some can be harmful, leave lasting emotional and physical damage. This is the troubling story of a romance between a prominent dentist and her coworker. From the beginning, their relationship displayed signs of turmoil. Over nearly 5 years, they broke up and reconciled multiple times. Despite the ups and downs, she remained optimistic, giving him numerous opportunities. In reality, he never truly let her go. He employed various forms of emotional manipulation, pressure, and psychological control to keep her close. When she finally gathered the strength to take charge of her life and informed him of her decision to move on for good, it triggered a series of events with catastrophic consequences. Preeti Reddy was born in the lively Indian city of Pimpri Chinchwad, located along the Pavana River. The family enjoyed a comfortable life due to her parents' stable and substantial income. Preeti grew up with her younger sister Nithya. From a young age, the sisters developed a strong bond and were almost inseparable. They shared everything: childhood secrets, dreams, and challenges. Their parents created a loving environment, emphasizing strong cultural values and respect for family. As financially secure individuals, their parents were committed to investing in their daughter's well-being and future. Education was a top priority in the Reddy home. The girls were given every opportunity to thrive. In 1996, the Reddy family made a significant change by moving to Australia in search of better opportunities and a brighter future. They settled in a quiet suburb of Sydney and bought a spacious home that quickly became their refuge. Preeti and Nithya started attending a well-regarded private school, where both thrived academically. Preeti developed into a bright, charismatic young woman who was friendly, sociable, and ambitious. From an early age, and she aspired to follow her parents' path in healthcare, finding true joy in helping others and making a positive impact. After finishing high school, Preeti made an unexpected decision to return to India to study dentistry at a medical university in New Delhi. Her parents, always supportive, trusted her choices and allowed her the freedom to decide for herself. By 2019, Preeti had earned her degree and returned to Sydney, where she moved back in with her family. She started working at the Dental and Physiotherapy Centre in Western Sydney, while also enhancing her skills at the Royal Dental Hospital in Melbourne. Later, she joined Glenbrook Dental, a comprehensive care clinic where she worked as a general practitioner. Highly skilled and passionate about her profession, Dr. Preeti Reddy was recognized by her colleagues and patients as a rising star in dentistry. She was committed to continuous learning and improving her expertise. In early 2013, just before a major life event, she was enrolled in specialized courses for dental implants, hoped to open her own clinic in Melbourne. Unfortunately, those dreams would remain unfulfilled. While still studying at the Royal Dental Hospital in Melbourne, Preeti met a young dentist named Harshwardhan Nard, whom his friends called Harshwardhan Nard. He, like Preeti, was of Indian descent and came from a family of healthcare professionals. Following their tradition by pursuing a career in dentistry, the two quickly connected, feeling an attraction toward each other almost right away. A few months into their friendship, they started dating, but early on, some warning signs emerged. Harshwardhan was possessive and had a quick temper. He frequently questioned Preeti's choices, emotionally manipulated her, and tried to control her subtly. He also undermined her confidence, making her feel inadequate or inferior. He often blamed her for his struggles and claimed she was the source of his pain. Nithya, Preeti's younger sister, was the first to sense that something was wrong. She knew Preeti was dating someone, but Preeti had never introduced him to the family. She never brought him home and avoided talking about him. At the same time, Preeti's behavior changed. She became withdrawn, insecure, and distant. The spark in her eyes faded, turning her from a joyful and confident woman into someone who seemed tense, under emotional strain. Harshvardhan was controlling the relationship, and Preeti appeared trapped. Their parents often asked to meet this man in Preeti's life, but she consistently changed the subject or refused to discuss it. It was clear that she felt uncomfortable in the relationship, yet she remained emotionally tied to Harshvardhan and found it difficult to escape. Harshvardhan lived in Tamworth and worked at a dental clinic. He was in a long-distance relationship with Preeti, as they never lived together. Deep down, she felt that their relationship wouldn't end well. It was unstable, filled with frequent arguments and emotional tension, leaving Preeti feeling overwhelmed. For a long time, she kept their relationship a secret. It wasn't until about 6 months in that she shared it with a few close friends. Preeti's sister, Nithya, met Harshvardhan a few times and immediately disliked him. She later remembered feeling that there was something unsettling about his presence. By 2014, Preeti and Harshvardhan were publicly acknowledged as a couple, but their relationship remained complicated. Preeti never introduced him to her parents and refused to meet his family. Soon after, they broke up, but Preeti chose to keep it private. This cycle of breaking up and getting back together continued for years. At times, she wouldn't inform anyone about their breakups, and at other times, she wouldn't admit they had reconciled. It became clear that she felt embarrassed by their unstable relationship. Harshvardhan often accused Preeti of not investing enough in their relationship and pushed her to move to Tamworth so they could live together. However, Preeti was resolute. She didn't want to abandon her career or leave her family in Sydney. Meanwhile, Harshvardhan was unwilling to move for her. In the fall of 2016, Preeti and Harshvardhan broke up again. Preeti wanted it to be final this time, but Harshvardhan wasn't ready to let go. In October, he started planning a surprise party for her upcoming 30th birthday. However, the surprise did not happen because Preeti had already organized a celebration at her parents' house, invited close friends and colleagues, deliberately excluding Harshvardhan. Despite this clear message, Harshvardhan continued to try to re-enter her life. He pleaded for another chance, insisting that he had changed and that things would be different this time. Although he had never been physically aggressive, his constant emotional pressure had caused Preeti significant distress. This lack of visible harm may have contributed to Preeti deciding to give him one last opportunity, hoping for a fresh start. However, things did not improve. Preeti still had emotional feelings for Harshvardhan, which made it difficult to cut ties completely. Additionally, Harshvardhan manipulated her emotions, making her feel guilty for the end of their relationship. In 2018, Preeti made one last attempt to save her relationship, but soon realized that no matter how much she tried or sacrificed, nothing was going to change. That fall, she decided to end it for good. Just a few weeks later, in November, she met a young physician from Melbourne, and they quickly formed a genuine connection. This new man was everything Harshvardhan was not: kind, attentive, and compassionate. For the first time in years, Preeti was open about her relationship, proudly introducing him to her family and friends. She felt truly happy and hopeful about the future. She even considered moving to Melbourne to be closer to him by applying for jobs in the area. Prestigious dental centers quickly responded to her applications, and after receiving multiple offers, she chose a clinic where she hoped to work after completing her responsibilities in Sydney. In December, she excitedly told her friends that she had never felt this way before. She had finally moved on from her past. Her loved ones were delighted to see her so happy. But unfortunately, this joy was short-lived. In January, Harshvardhan found out that Preeti was in a new relationship. Overwhelmed by jealousy and anger, he began contacting her again through calls and messages, hoping to meet her. However, Preeti had decided to move on and ignored all of his attempts to reach her. By February, during a phone conversation with his brother, Harshvardhan admitted that he couldn't accept what he felt was a betrayal. He spoke about Preeti as if she were still his, viewing her new relationship as a personal insult. He expressed that he wouldn't let her marry someone else and suggested he might take extreme actions. At the time, his words seemed like mere bitter threats, stemming from frustration and a sense of powerlessness. On March 1st, 2019, Sydney hosted a two-day international dental conference showcasing the latest advancements in dentistry. Dr. Preethi attended the conference and stayed at the Swissotel Hotel with two close friends and colleagues. Her ex-boyfriend, Dr. Harshwardhan, also rented a room at this hotel. After the first day, Preethi shared with her friends that she felt uneasy because Harshwardhan was watching her closely throughout the conference and seemed to be waiting for a chance to talk to her. His behavior was making her feel uncomfortable and unpredictable. Later that evening, the friends went to a nightclub to relax, but Preethi still felt anxious and kept looking over her shoulder. The second day was filled with even more tension as Harshwardhan insisted they meet and talk. Preethi felt anxious and conflicted, while her friends urged her not to give in despite their concerns. After the conference, she reluctantly decided to speak with Harshwardhan, hoping to resolve their issues. She had practiced what she wanted to say, wishing he would listen and put an end to the drama so she could continue with her life. At around 6:30 p.m. on March 2nd, surveillance cameras recorded a gray Volkswagen Golf, which belonged to Preethi, leaving the underground garage of Swissotel Hotel. Preethi was driving, and Harshwardhan was seated next to her. About an hour later, they arrived at the Ravi's Cumin Indian restaurant in nearby Crow's Nest and entered together. Witnesses, including other diners and restaurant staff, noted that there was significant tension at their table. Preethi looked anxious and wanted to leave, while Harshwardhan tried to hold her hand and interrupted her as she spoke. The waiter in charge of their table recalled that Preethi mentioned she was planning to move to Melbourne, confessed to being in love with someone else, and asked Harshwardhan to let her go. Despite this, Harshwardhan seemed unaware of her feelings. He continued to talk about marriage and promised to move to Sydney just to be close to her. Around 10:16 p.m., they left the restaurant and walked to their car but didn't get in. They argued for over an hour at that spot. Surveillance cameras show Harshwardhan reaching out towards Preethi, then pushing her as she backed away and took a step back, causing her to stumble. They finally drove off close to midnight and spent another 15 minutes driving around the city before stopping in a mall parking lot. Neither of them got out of the car. Surveillance cameras on the building captured them in a heated argument, with Harshwardhan making wild gestures and Preethi crying visibly. At about 2 p.m., Preethi got out of the car and entered a 24-hour fast food restaurant in the mall. She bought a bottle of water and waited near the entrance, seemingly for Harshwardhan to come out. However, when she went back, he was still sitting in the car. They then drove to the Swissotel Hotel. He quietly led Preethi past the front desk and into his suite. After around 3 a.m., she did not leave. On the morning of March 3rd, around 10 a.m., Preethi called her younger sister to say she would be home in a couple of hours. That was the last time anyone heard from her. Her family expected her to be home by lunchtime, but she never arrived. It was unusual for her phone to be off. By 3 p.m., worry turned into panic. Preethi was always in contact and would inform someone if she was running late. Her family quickly began reaching out to her friends and coworkers to find out where she might be. It was then they discovered that she had been seen at a conference with her ex, Harshwardhan, who was reportedly trying to reconnect with her and had been persistent. Nithya attempted to call Harshwardhan, but he either ignored her calls or didn't answer, even though his phone was still on. On the evening of March 3rd, the Reddy family went to the police to report Preethi missing, expressing their concerns that her ex-boyfriend might be involved. Simultaneously, they began their own search by reaching out to anyone who might have seen or talked to Preethi. Nithya also posted on social media, sharing recent photos and asking for any information to help locate her sister. Within 24 hours, her post reached nearly 2,000 people, including Preethi's former patients. Many offered to assist in the search or to help spread the word, but no one had any concrete information about Preethi's location. The only potential lead remained Harshwardhan, who continued to avoid answering calls. On the afternoon of March 4th, Harshwardhan finally took one of Nithya's calls. He responded in a disturbingly calm manner, stating that Preethi was an adult who would return soon. He acknowledged seeing her at the conference but claimed they had only spoken briefly before going their separate ways. Oddly, just an hour later, Harshwardhan called Nithya back, this time very angry. He yelled at her, asking why she was contacting his friends, family, and co-workers about Preeti. He accused the Reddy family of unfairly blaming him and damaging his reputation without any proof. His reaction raised serious concerns, while he showed little worry about Preeti's sudden disappearance or the possibility that she might be in danger. He seemed more upset that people were searching for her and that attention was being directed at him. After discovering the situation, it was clear that Preeti had agreed to meet Harshwardhan for dinner, and he likely became the last person to see her. Harshwardhan's family urged him to go to the police and provide a full account before any formal summons. Later that day, he went to a police station in Sydney, saying he wanted to assist and share what he knew. Officers quickly noticed his unusual behavior. He was sweating, visibly anxious, and pacing while gesturing wildly. He claimed to have seen Preeti not only at a conference but also during dinner on March 2nd. He stated that they had a final conversation that helped them both move on, and that he called her a cab, which he said was the last time he saw her. However, there were inconsistencies in his story. When asked to repeat the events, he became confused, contradicted himself, and struggled to keep his timeline consistent. Despite his odd behavior, the police had no solid evidence to detain him, so they let him go. Before he left, a detective casually mentioned that they were examining surveillance footage that might show the movements of both Preeti and Harshwardhan that evening, intending to reconstruct the timeline. This statement appeared to unsettle Harshwardhan. A few hours later, he returned to the police station and changed his story. He confessed that he hadn't called a cab for Preeti. She had actually driven herself in her own car, which was the same Volkswagen Golf they had used to go to the restaurant. When questioned about why he had initially lied, he said he was nervous and didn't think those details were important. Later that day, on March 4th, news reported a serious car accident on the New England highway. A BMW had sped into oncoming traffic and collided head-on with a truck. The driver was pronounced dead at the scene and was identified as Dr. Harshwardhan Nard. This raised the question, how did he end up in such a terrible accident on a mostly empty road? Surveillance footage showed that Harshwardhan had quickly sped up and deliberately driven into the truck's path. This incident appeared to be an act of self-harm, and further evidence soon supported this idea. It was evident that the detective's mention of the footage had left Harshwardhan visibly shaken. He likely understood that investigators would soon reconstruct the events of the entire evening. The day after Harshwardhan's death, Preeti's abandoned Volkswagen Golf was discovered in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Sydney. Inside the trunk, in a large blue suitcase, was her lifeless body. Forensic investigators later confirmed that she had suffered a severe head injury and multiple stab wounds, 11 in total, mostly to her neck and back. 2 days later, after reviewing security footage and interviewing witnesses, the police were able to piece together the events of March 2nd. Preeti had agreed to meet Harshwardhan for dinner, likely seeking closure and trying to move on from their relationship. A waiter, who overheard parts of their conversation, remembered that Preeti appeared upset and frightened. After dinner, they drove around for a few hours before arriving at Swissotel Hotel. It is suspected that he emotionally manipulated her, a tactic he had used in the past, making her feel guilty. Since she was never seen leaving the hotel, detectives believe that the tragic event likely took place in the room. A forensic investigation uncovered traces of blood in the bathroom, although it had been cleaned so thoroughly that housekeeping noticed nothing unusual. It is thought that Preeti went to the bathroom to call her new partner, and that Harshwardhan, overhearing the call, became enraged. Once she ended the call, he attacked her from behind, hitting her on the head and then inflicting multiple wounds with a sharp object. After finishing what he had to do, Harshwardhan calmly cleaned himself up and went to the front desk to extend his stay for another night. He had breakfast in the hotel restaurant before heading out to shop at local stores. There, he bought a large blue suitcase and various cleaning supplies. He returned to his hotel room around 5 p.m., checked out, and when a staff member offered to help with his luggage, they remarked that the suitcase seemed quite heavy. Harshwardhan casually explained that he had bought too many gifts for his family, He then loaded his belongings into Preethi's Volkswagen Golf and drove to a quiet corner of the city, where he parked the car in a discreet spot, hoping it would remain unnoticed for some time. After everything that happened, Harshwarden picked up his BMW from the parking garage and drove home to Tamworth. On the way, he stopped at a gas station to fill his tank and grab some coffee. Several witnesses later identified him there, noting that his phone kept ringing, but he either declined the calls or ignored them. It was later confirmed that those calls were from Nithya, who was desperately trying to contact him while looking for her sister. Harshwarden likely thought he had committed the perfect crime, covering his tracks so well that investigators wouldn't be able to connect him to anything. He hadn't considered that there were surveillance cameras at almost every place he and Preethi had gone that day. Those recordings would soon reveal the truth. When Harshwarden understood his error that the police would have clear evidence of his involvement, he decided not to wait for an arrest or trial. Instead, he took control of the situation and ended his life before justice could catch up with him. Harshwarden's family, despite the increasing evidence against him, struggled to accept the idea that he could commit such a terrible act. They found it hard to believe he could take another person's life in such a brutal and deliberate way. Meanwhile, the Reddy family, grieving the loss of their cherished daughter and sister, decided to take action. They started a campaign to create the first center in Australia focused on helping women impacted by domestic violence. This center would not only provide emotional support, but also offer safe housing, legal advice, and help for those trying to leave abusive or manipulative relationships. The Reddy family played a key role in supporting the project by providing funding, using their voices to raise public awareness through media and outreach. They made sure that people in need were aware of a safe place to go, where they could find both protection and support for healing.